Arthur and Michael calmly sat in the living room of Gerald's house as Christopher told them the true reason behind his decision to quit being Terrence's retainer and become Zion's subordinate. At first, the two of them thought that the chubby boy had an easy mission in Solterra, allowing him to return to Pangea alive. But the more they listened to the story, the more they thought that the boy was just telling them a bunch of nonsense. However, when Christopher came to the part where Gerald suddenly appeared in the barbarian lands, Lady Callista couldn't help but look at her son, who suddenly showed up at their residence with a cast on his right arm. Gerald and his wife, Alessia, were both listening to Christopher's story, interested to hear more about Zion's adventures. Even Shah, who had Remy seated on her lap, had a serious expression on her face as she listened to her brother's exploits. When the war against Arundel started, Christopher was no longer able to say anything because he was tasked to operate the Grand Ballista. At this point, Gerald took over and told everyone how Zion fearlessly faced one of Arundel's generals, ordering his subordinates to lay down a trap for the rank 9 sovereign. Arthur, whose lifelong wish was to reach the monarch rank, clenched his fists tightly. The achievement of fighting against a rank 9 sovereign was enough for him to become a monarch. This was especially true if he consumed the Jinn's core, allowing him to gain enough points to break through to the next rank. After Gerald shamelessly told everyone that he was the one who dealt the last blow to the fire dragon, Michael fixed the glasses on his face, while Lady Callista covered her lips with her right hand. Arthur took a deep breath in order to calm his nerves because Gerald's story had captivated him completely. As someone who loved to fight, he could imagine himself fighting alongside the Ogre King and the Tigerkin King. But when Gerald mentioned his son's desperate attempt to lure the Magian Prince to the place where a trap was waiting for Arundel, everyone inside the room, including Christopher, nearly stopped breathing due to suspense. The chubby boy had no idea about how close his master was to death in order to bring the Magian Prince to the center of the formation. If in the past his respect for Zion was already high, then now it had reached the peak, making him even more determined to become the 7-year-old's retainer. After I faced off the Magian Prince's giant fireball to protect Zion, I blacked out for a few minutes, Gerald said with a bitter smile on his face. When I regained my consciousness, I saw something that I never thought that I would see in my lifetime. Gerald paused for a bit before clenching his fists. Mammon made an appearance and punched the Magian Prince, pinning him to the ground, Gerald stated. The being whom we desperately fought together went down after a single punch. Could you believe that? However, I saw then, and there the vast gap between Mammon and Arundel. It made me realize how powerful the fiends really are. After that moment, the mission that I received was completed, allowing me to return to Solterra. But I didn't leave right away. I wanted to see everything until the end. Arundel begged for his life like the coward that he was, and even asked Mammon to give him a chance to gain his forgiveness. The fiend agreed and ordered Arundel to fight Zion. When I heard the fiend's order, I felt as if all the breath in my body disappeared completely. Alessia felt faint and a little lightheaded after hearing her husband's words. There was no way that her son could fight against a Magian Prince, especially after everything that had happened. But just as Arundel was about to attack Zion, the bolts that we forged descended from the sky and hit the Magian Prince's body, Gerald said, while doing his best to not look at Christopher. He didn't want the chubby boy to get the limelight for being the one to kill the Magian Prince, because he didn't know how his father would react if he heard this bit of information. 4 reinforced bolts hit their mark, ending Arundel's life, Gerald added. That was the last thing I saw before I was teleported back to Pangea. A silence that lasted for a full minute graced the living room as everyone took their time to digest everything that had happened. A moment later, a sigh escaped Arthur's lips before looking at his son with a solemn expression on his face. "Why?" Arthur asked. "Why did Zion ask the Laplace demon to send you to Solterra instead of me? If I were there, I would have become a monarch after completing the mission that you received." Gerald only chuckled after hearing his father's aggrieved words. Zion initially wanted Arthur to come instead of him, but Laplace Demon and the One rejected his proposal. Because of this, Gerald was the one who was sent to Solterra, having received the permission to help the boy in his fight against the Magian Prince. But Gerald and 13 had already discussed what they would say if Arthur were to ask this question to them. Why would he choose you? Gerald arched an eyebrow. You never did anything for him or for our family. You allowed a dimensional gate to spawn right in front of our house, and you forced children to fend for themselves. You also did nothing to make our family's life easier. Even the weapons I forged were forcefully taken away by you. After getting kicked out of the family, we learned to fend for ourselves and did our best to survive. We never gained any benefit from the Levinas family. It has always been you who benefited from ours. Tell me, do you really believe that my son will allow you to take advantage of our family forever? Do you really think that you can always have your way? If you had only treated Zion with a bit of kindness, and if you had treated our family well, wouldn't my son repay you properly? However, you did none of that. It has always been you benefiting from us. I guess Zion had enough of your shamelessness and decided that you didn't deserve to become a monarch. If as a throne, you treat us as trash, then what more would happen once you become a monarch? I would have invited you back to the family if I had become a monarch, and we could have started with a clean state, Arthur replied. I would have invited you back to the family if I had become a monarch, and we could have started with a clean state. Arthur, me? Go back to the family. Gerald sneered. No, thank you. Why would I return to that rotten place? I'm happy here with my family, and I'll continue to be happy with them. We don't need the Levinas family. We don't need you. Gerald's emotion rose up to the surface as he glared at his father. All the pain that he had kept inside after he was kicked out of the family burst forth like a raging tide. But after becoming a blacksmith, he had gained the ability to rein in his emotions. Zion will be staying in Solterra for a few more years, Gerald said after a while. And knowing him, I'm sure that he will face more hardships. I also know where he will be going next, the main continent. Perhaps he will face another threat like the Magian Prince. If you are really desperate to become a monarch, why don't you use your influence and connections to find him there? Maybe, just maybe, he will change his mind about you and call you when he needs someone to help him face a mission similar to the one we just finished. Besides, my son is a simple boy. If he has shown kindness, he will surely reciprocate. Before I forget, for some reason, Zion has developed a fascination for attack helicopters. He is expecting the Remington clan to give him one after saving Harry from the orcs and helping him complete his mission. Of course, this isn't guaranteed, but I'm certain that whoever gives him an attack helicopter will definitely receive his good impression. Also, he has already recognized Christopher as his right-hand man. If something bad happens to him, I'm sure that my son will be out for blood. Gerald smirked at his father and even playfully gave Michael a wink. Since his brother was the one who managed most of the family's affairs, he decided to appeal to him about Christopher, allowing the Leventis clan to let him go peacefully. Arthur glanced at the chubby boy whose gaze was locked onto the carpeted floor at his feet. Did Zion really say that you were his right-hand man? Arthur asked. Yes, Your Excellency, Christopher replied in a heartbeat. This is why I wish to quit being Master Terrence's retainer. The only one I wish to serve is young Master Zion. Fine, I will allow it, Arthur declared. Let's go, Michael. Yes, father. Michael fixed his glasses and stood up. He then gave Gerald a brief nod before following Arthur to the front door. Callista, let's go back, Arthur said calmly. I'll return after an hour. Callista remained seated. Arthur knew that his wife would do whatever she said, so he decided to leave before they got into an argument with each other. Since she said that she would return after an hour, then he would just wait for her to return to their residence. For now, he needed to inform the Leventis family in Solterra to keep a lookout for Zion. If making the 7-year-old happy was enough to allow Arthur to become a monarch, he would not mind giving his good grandson an attack helicopter, which the boy wished to have for a very long time. 3 years had passed since the great battle at the Valbera archipelago. The sound of hurried footsteps echoed across the forest floor. We can't hold on much longer, a teenage boy shouted. All of you run away. Don't be stupid. How can we leave you behind? A teenage girl raised her hand to summon a rank 2 forest wolf. helping the boy face off against the rank 4 alpha bear that had suddenly ambushed their group from the rear. The forest wolf tried to get the bear's attention and even succeeded in doing so. However, it miscalculated the bear's strength and speed and suffered a serious injury after being swept away by its sharp claws. "Run!" the boy shouted as he grabbed the girl's hand, pulling her as he dashed. 2 of their members had already died from the bear's sneak attack, leaving only the 2 of them behind. The forest wolf tried to block the bear's path, but it was of no use. The alpha monster easily grabbed the wolf's head and crushed it effortlessly, making the avatar turn into particles of light. Once an avatar died in battle, its death was permanent, never to rise again. But it was still able to give the 2 teenagers half a minute head start to flee the bear, who was now charging at them from behind. "We can't outrun it," the teenage boy thought as he heard the bear's roars coming from behind him. As a last desperate effort to protect his party member, he grabbed her body and used his back to shield her from the incoming blow. But at that exact moment, a blur flew past him. When the boy saw the fluttering blonde hair that only lasted for a few seconds, he suddenly felt hope bloom in his heart. The teenage girl with long blonde hair threw a pouch at the bear's head, making it explode. A red dust emerged from it, making the rank 4 alpha monster roar in pain as finely sliced, dried red chili peppers exploded on its face. "Run!" the blonde girl shouted, urging the 2 teenagers to run away. The 2, who had been given a second chance at life, didn't hesitate to follow her orders to run away. The blonde-haired girl glanced at the alpha bear before she, too, ran away. She didn't hesitate to escape, knowing that this was a monster far too powerful for her to face alone. Suddenly, a loud roar spread in the forest as the bear's brown fur suddenly changed to red. Although it was still having a hard time opening its eyes, it made a mad dash toward the fleeing girl, who had challenged its pride and dignity. The bear's strength and speed increased drastically, so even if the teenage girl zigzagged through the trees in order to create an obstacle for the bear, it was of no use. The bear simply smashed through these trees, destroying them like a juggernaut. She glanced behind her to look at the bear that had gone berserk. Because of that, she didn't notice the tree root in front of her, tripping her as she ran. The alpha monster, whose vision had gradually cleared, raised its paws in order to crush the human in front of it. Just as its claws were about to land on the girl's body, something big grabbed it from behind and pulled it away. The girl's eyes widened in shock when she saw a giant skunk-like monster slam the bear's body on the ground as if it was a wrestler. Knowing that it was not enough, the skunk jumped and body slammed the bear, using its elbow to smash the alpha monster's face. The 2 monsters tousled, grappled, and bit on each other's body, making dirt and trees fly in every direction. While this was happening, a voice sounded in the girl's ears, making her turn her head to look behind her. "Sister, you should always pay attention to where you are going." A 10-year-old boy, with short black hair and green eyes, knelt beside the fallen girl and used a handkerchief to clean her bleeding knee. A moment later, he poured a healing potion over it, allowing the injury to heal at a rapid rate. Zion, Shasha hugged her brother, whom she hadn't seen for 3 years, tightly, refusing to let him go. "It's good to see you again, Shasha," 13 said as he hugged his sister and patted her head. "Don't worry. Everything is going to be fine now. Zion, there's a black snake on your neck." Shasha, who noticed that a black snake was looking at her, stuttered. Tiona was only a few centimeters away from Shasha's nose, and if she decided to bite the girl, Shasha would not be able to dodge her strike at such a close range. But the little snake had no intention of doing so and was merely looking at the beautiful teenage girl whom her master had called sister. "Don't worry. She's my beast companion," 13 replied as he pulled back to lightly rub Tiona's chin with his finger. "Her name is Tiona." "Tiona, this is my sister, Shasha. Please get along with her." Tiona nodded her head and flicked her tongue in Shasha's direction, as if telling her that the 2 of them were now friends. Shasha recognized that the black snake was a Domini Mortis, which was the main reason why she panicked. But after hearing that she was her brother's beast companion, she finally regained her calm and looked behind her brother. The rumbling sound had finally come to a complete stop, proving that the battle had finally ended. The bear was still alive, but it couldn't move because Giga Chad, in his Titan form, was seated on its back, making sure that the bear had nowhere to go. "What do you want to do with the bear, sister?" 13 asked. "Do you want to kill it?" "Yes," Shasha replied firmly. "It has killed many people, and it will continue to kill if left alone." "Too bad, Christopher isn't here," 13 muttered as he looked at the rank 4 alpha monster. "Also, too bad. It's only an alpha monster and not a sovereign. If it were a sovereign, 13 wouldn't hesitate to kill it since it would give him 1 apocalypse point after doing so. Since it wouldn't give him any benefits, he decided to let his sister kill it, giving her a chance to get an item from dealing the last blow to the monster. 13 was surprised when Shasha summoned a blue sword that was at the peak of the bronze grade. Although it wasn't a rapier, it was slender enough to be used by a fencer like her in battle. With a decisive thrust on a monster's eye, Shasha drove her sword deep into the monster's head, hitting its brain. Giga had already dealt serious injuries to the bear, so it didn't even have the strength to resist the teenage girl's thrust, which would end its life. Half a minute later, the bear finally breathed its last. Giga didn't hesitate to open the bear's chest. After retrieving its core, he gave it to his master. "Good job, Giga," 13 praised the Chad skunk, who, after traveling with him for 3 years, had evolved into a rank 5 sovereign. After praising one of his most loyal companions, 13 handed the core to his sister. Shasha didn't reject her brother's gift and accepted it happily. "Don't consume it right now," 13 said. "We might find a rank 5 monster, which will be several times better than this." Shasha nodded in understanding, knowing that absorbing a rank 5 core was most ideal before breaking through the rookie rank. "I don't have a place to store this core," Shasha replied. "Hold it for me for the time being, Zion." "Okay." 13 didn't hesitate to store the core inside his storage before holding his sister's hand. "Tell me your current situation as well as the mission that was given to you here in Solterra," 13 said with a solemn expression on his face. Just like what he did with Christopher, he would send her sister back safely to Pangea regardless of the difficulty of the mission she currently had. Shasha had full trust in her little brother. In her heart, he was someone she respected and looked up to. After hearing what his sister's mission was, 13 remained calm. But deep inside, he felt a bit worried since Shasha's mission was quite vague. "I guess I need to know more about her current situation," 13 thought. "Maybe that will give me a clue about how to complete her mission." At the same time that his sister had finished saying what her mission was, the 10-year-old heard a notification inside his head, prompting him to open his status page. Unique quest. Quest category, chain quest. Quest name, The 13 Trials. Final trial, prevent the Moon Princess from getting corrupted. Reward, your Destiny Bond skill will gain an upgrade. You will be able to summon your beast companions in Pangea. You will be allowed to impart martial skills, as well as rune equipment, to 3 people outside of your family. You will finally be able to return to Pangea. Unlike the time when he was with Christopher and the others, he didn't receive the same mission that Shasha possessed. This only meant one thing. Since the rewards are quite good, I guess this is going to be another difficult mission, 13 thought. Instead of being happy, he was genuinely concerned because his mission gave him anxiety. It was the same anxiety he felt when his hosts were about to meet their end in the hands of people and beings who did not wish for them to exist. 13 followed his sister into a cave that was located at the base of a mountain. Shasha told him that aside from her, there were 16 other wanderers with her. However, since 2 of them had died due to the bear attack, only 14 were left. Originally, there were 30 of them, but the others decided to join another group of wanderers who were located in a valley outside of the forest. When 13 asked his sister why she didn't join that other group, a rare look of disgust appeared on Shasha's face, making the boy arch an eyebrow. "That other camp is ruled by Cain Stallard," Shasha said. "He wanted me to become his lover, but I refused. Although he didn't do anything to me, he always ordered his subordinates to harass our people, especially when we were hunting in the forest. Due to their harassment, many died, forcing the others to join his team because they were afraid that they would be the ones who would be targeted next. Stallard. 13 snorted. I guess being part of Monarch family makes him think that he can get everything he wants. He's just a frog who wants to eat a swan. You did well in refusing his offer. The 10-year-old wasn't aware that Arthur had thought long and hard on how to make 13 like him. Gerald's words 3 years ago had made him understand that if he had been kind to 13 and his family, the latter might have asked the Laplace demon to take him to Solterra. Of course, this was only a misunderstanding. From the start, the boy wanted Arthur to become a monarch. But since the Laplace demon and the one were against it, he settled for the next best thing and took his father instead. This misunderstanding made Arthur go out of his way to introduce Shasha as a proper member of the main branch of the Levinus family. She participated in high-class parties and made connections with the other members of the Monarch clans, as well as the 10 prestigious families. It was also because of this reason that Cain Stallard didn't dare to harm Shasha, despite wishing for her to become his lover. It was an unspoken rule among the Monarch clans to never antagonize Arthur Leventus. Although he was just a throne, his fighting prowess matched that of a monarch. They even said that if he possessed a mythical weapon or had a way of breaking their domains, a one-on-one battle against the patriarch of the Levinus family could turn ugly really quickly. Fortunately, the Monarch clans didn't know that Arthur did, in fact, possess mythical weapons, as well as the ability to break their domains. Because of this, Arthur no longer feared the Monarch clans because he was confident that even if he didn't manage to kill them in battle, he would certainly be able to deal serious injuries to them, making them reconsider antagonizing him again. Of course, unless he was pushed into a corner, he wouldn't reveal his trump cards. When Shasha and 13 arrived at the end of the cave, they saw 10 teenagers huddled around a campfire. "Where are Ross and Miles?" Shasha asked. They decided to join the other team. Princess, a teenage girl who had long brown hair, replied. "Cain's subordinates came here as usual and promised us that we will be well taken care of if we join their team." Ross and Miles said that they had enough, so they decided to join them. 13 blinked once then twice before looking at his sister. "Why is she calling you princess?" 13 asked. A sigh escaped Shasha's lips because she already lost count on how many times she asked the other wanderers to stop calling her princess. "It's because Cain calls me his princess," Shasha replied. "Everyone else calls me princess because of that." The disgust in Shasha's tone didn't escape 13's hearing, making him shake his head helplessly. To a certain extent, he could understand why Cain was infatuated with his sister, Shasha. His sister was really a beautiful girl, and he was certain that after a few years, she would become a beauty that would cause the heads of every guy to turn in her direction. "By the way, do all of you have the same mission as my sister?" 13 asked the teenagers, who were looking at him with curiosity. "Sister," the girl, whose name was Miriam, looked at the younger boy with curiosity. "Who is this boy, princess? Why is he calling you sister?" "Because I am his sister," Shasha replied. "This is my biological brother, Zion." Everyone had shocked expressions on their faces as they looked at the boy, who was younger than them by a few years. But how?" Miriam asked. "He isn't even 13 years old yet. Isn't that the age when children get spirited away?" "You're right," 13 replied. "I entered a dimensional gate by accident, and because of that, I am kind of stuck here in Solterra for the time being." The wanderers looked at him with pity because they had heard of such stories before. There were children that the monsters had tossed inside the dimensional gate to become their plaything, preventing them from returning to Pangea. Shasha, who knew the full story, kept her lips closed and simply nodded to confirm her brother's explanation. "Okay, so let's return to the topic." 13 clapped his hands together. "Do all of you have the same mission?" The wanderers glanced at each other before nodding their heads. "Very well. So your mission is to enter the Gate of the Moonlight, which will allow you to return to Pangea," 13 stated. "But do any of you have any clue as to where this Gate of the Moonlight is located?" All the wanderers shook their heads. They still hadn't fully explored the place they were in, so they had no idea where the gate was located. 13 also didn't have any information about the Gate of the Moonlight in his soul core, which meant that this gate might have only appeared after his host had died in Pangea. Unlike the beacon of light, where all wanderers would complete the mission if one of them lit the beacon of hope, the mission that Shasha and the other wanderers possessed was an individual thing, meaning they would have to enter the gate of the moonlight by themselves before they cleared their mission. Okay, I have another question. 13 rested his hands over his waist as he scanned the faces of the wanderers in front of him. Who among you wishes to join Cain's group? Don't worry, I will not look down upon any of you who wish to switch sides. After all, your survival should be your top priority. Although my sister is beautiful and strong, I can tell that only 3 of you here know how to fight. The rest haven't received any formal training, so if you all wish to switch sides, no one here will blame you. Everyone lowered their heads, because this was the question that had been inside their heads for the past few days. Cain had promised them that if they joined his group, they would be treated fairly and equally. In fact, when they were still part of the same group, Cain didn't really harm any of them. It was simply his obsession with Shasha that prompted him to use them as pawns, so that the girl that he liked would be pressured to stay by his side. Unfortunately for him, 13 had indoctrinated Shasha that no matter what happened, she should prioritize her safety and well-being above all else when she arrived in Solterra. 13 made it clear that aside from her family, she shouldn't easily trust anyone, especially boys who only approached her because of her beauty. I want to stay here with the princess, Miriam said with a determined look on her face. When I was being chased by goblins, she was the one that saved me. I want to return the favor no matter what. 13 crossed his arms over his chest as he looked at the girl up and down. What can you do? 13 inquired. I can cook, Miriam replied. 13 nodded. Okay, you can stay. Although he was a system, for some reason, he sucked at cooking. Even if all the ingredients were properly measured, the heat controlled accordingly, the food he prepared tasted plain. His mother, Alessia, even commented that his cooking lacked the heart needed to make the food delicious. Back then, 13 thought that his mother was referring to an ingredient, which was the heart, that would make his cooking delicious. Fortunately, this misunderstanding was cleared up before 13 actually used a heart as an ingredient in the dishes he cooked. How about the rest? 13 asked. Do you wish to stay here knowing that you will live a harsher life compared to being in Cain's team? The wanderer firmly nodded their head because they could feel an instinctual level that siding with Shasha was better compared to siding with one of the scions of the Stallard family. Good. Then, tell me your specialties, as well as the abilities you currently have. 13 ordered. Some of you have killed monsters and gained items from them. It will be best if you tell me what you can do without hiding anything. That way, I will be able to devise a plan to turn all of you into proper wanderers who have a chance to return to Pangea. The wanderers looked at the boy, who seemed to have taken the leadership position. They then glanced at Shasha as if asking her if she was fine with this arrangement. Zion is stronger than me, Shasha stated. I trust him with my life. After hearing her words, the wanderers looked at the boy with doubt written all over their faces. Suddenly, they heard something moving towards their direction, making everyone take a fighting stance. The flickering lights of the firelight then illuminated a monster, whose eyes glowed like a torch in the darkness. They also noticed that it was dragging a bear behind it, making their faces turn pale. Calm down, everyone, 13 said. This is Giga. He's my beast companion. A moment later, a black snake slithered towards 13 and crawled up on his body. Tiona had stayed with Giga outside the cave to eat the brain of the rank 4 alpha bear in order to acquire skill. The Blaze Chad skunk had hung the bear outside the cave to let it bleed out, removing its excess blood before bringing it back to his master. You know how to cook, right? 13 asked before taking out a sharp knife from his storage space and handing it to Miriam. Start cooking then. The boy even took out a few spices and condiments from his storage ring and placed them beside Miriam, making the teenage girl's eyes turn as wide as saucers. 13 was happy that his sister had grown to be a wonderful girl, despite the fact that he hadn't seen her for 3 years. What he didn't know was that Shasha now felt safer because, in her heart, no one was as strong as her brother. Now that he was here, she wouldn't have to be constantly on guard against Cain, whose actions were becoming more aggressive by the day, making her feel as if she was being trapped inside a cage. Shasha wasn't aware that the brother whom she loved and respected was already thinking of 100 ways to torture Cain, to make him understand that the beautiful girl that he wanted was someone that his hands were not allowed to touch. After the wanderers inside the cave regained their composure, they looked at the 10-year-old as if he was some kind of celebrity who had jumped out of the TV screen in order to meet them. Although they didn't know what the skunk-like monster's rank was, they knew that the bear it had dragged into the cave was a rank 4 alpha monster. Miriam had gained an item that allowed her to appraise the ranks of monsters up to rank 4. Since she couldn't see the Blaze Chad skunk's rank, it only meant one thing. It was higher than rank 4. No one in their group, even Shasha, was capable of defeating a rank 4 monster. Even as a team, they could only defeat a rank 2 monster at most. A rank 3 would already be incredibly difficult since only 4 of them knew how to fight, including Shasha. And if the rank 3 monster was an alpha monster, then only death awaited all of them. But with Zion's appearance, Miriam became hopeful. If the skunk monster behind him was his avatar, then they would no longer have to worry about Cain Stallard and his team. All of you work together to barbecue this bear's meat, 13 ordered. Those who won't work won't eat. So contribute to this team if you want to live. He could tell that the Wanderers were very dependent on Shasha because she came from one of the 10 prestigious families. Shasha didn't talk a lot, but she was a very kind person, nurtured by the love and care by their parents. 13 also trained her properly, so that when it was her turn to go to Solterra, her chances of surviving would be higher. Of course, he didn't tell her that she shouldn't work with other Wanderers to finish her quest. Going solo in a dangerous world, especially when they had just arrived in Solterra, was suicidal. If there were people who could help her accomplish her task, she should work with them, on the condition that they didn't harbor any malicious intent toward her. Because of this teaching, Shasha firmly distanced herself from Cain Stallard, who had shown excessive infatuation toward her even back in Pangea. So, the moment Shasha saw him in Solterra, she didn't hesitate to go as far away as possible from him, well aware that he was bad news. "Come with me, sister," 13 said as he held Shasha's hand. "Let's do some catching up." Shasha nodded and allowed her brother to pull her toward the entrance of the cave, where they could talk. "Mikhail said that you helped him finish his quest," Shasha said as she sat beside 13 at the entrance of the cave. "I just didn't expect that I would meet you here too, Zion." "Well, his quest is quite straightforward," 13 replied. "It was just a little hard to accomplish since he and the other Wanderers with the same quest were required to defeat a rank 4 sovereign protected by hundreds of rank 2 and rank 3 monsters." "You call that a little hard?" Shasha commented with an amused expression on her face. "That's nearly impossible to." Shasha then suddenly remembered Christopher's and her father's story about the rank 9 sovereign fire dragon and Magian prince that his brother had fought against in Solterra. Compared to those two powerful beings, a rank 4 sovereign would look cute in comparison. "You want to know how Mikhail defeated that many monsters?" 13 asked in a mischievous tone. Shasha nodded because she was truly curious about how their brother's team of Wanderers, whose numbers didn't exceed 30, were able to complete such an incredibly hard mission. "Oh, it really wasn't that hard," 13 said. "The monster that Mikhail's party needed to kill was a rank 4 white tiger sovereign. It was well protected by 10 rank 4 alpha tigers and hundreds of rank 1 up to rank 3 tigers. All I did was act as bait to make all of them run after me. When the white tiger made its move, Mikhail and the other Wanderers pushed several boulders down the mountain to create an avalanche, which annihilated all the monsters in one go. Of course, there had been a lot of preparation involved, which allowed him, Mikhail, and the other Wanderers to make the trap for the rank 4 sovereign and his subordinates. But since he didn't want to bore Shasha with the details, he skipped the details and simply told her the simple version of the story. Fortunately, the white tiger didn't die right away, 13 explained. It tried to dig itself out of the rubble, but it had already suffered serious injuries, so its progress was slow. When it finally poked its head out of the pile of stones, Mikhail was there, waiting for it. He slashed its head using his axe, but it was not enough to kill it. It took him at least a dozen tries before the white tiger finally died. But in the end, he succeeded and gained its avatar. Shasha smiled. She remembered how proud Mikhail looked when he summoned the rank 4 monster in their house, though at the expense of almost making Remy cry. Fortunately, their little sister was easy to pacify. All Mikhail did was to pick her up and take her for a ride on the white tiger around the house. Since then, the white tiger, whom Mikhail named Win, had become Remy's playmate alongside her pet, Fluffy. Unfortunately, your mission isn't as straightforward. 13 sighed. Enter the gate of the moonlight? It's such a vague mission. It reminded me of Christopher's mission, lighting the beacon of hope. I just hope we won't have to fight against a Magian prince or Magian princess, since there is no way that we can beat them this time around. 13 no longer wanted to face such powerful beings. Once was enough, and he sincerely hoped that Shasha's mission wouldn't be on the same level of difficulty. Brother, are you going to leave the others behind? Shasha asked. Although she didn't specify who the others were, it was very easy to tell that she was referring to the Wanderers who had decided to stay on Shasha's team. Don't worry, 13 answered. As long as they follow my orders, I will ensure that they will return to Pangea safely. But I will not allow any of them to piggyback off of me. They will have to put in some effort. This is for their own good. Shasha nodded her head in understanding. All the Wanderers who were given a mission would get rewards, depending on how much they contributed to the completion of their mission. Those who managed to clear it, because others did it for them, wouldn't gain any rewards from the one. Although the omnipotent god was deemed unfair at times because of how difficult some of the missions for the Wanderers were, the rewards it gave would always be fair. If possible, 13 wanted Shasha to have the highest contribution, allowing her to gain special abilities after she became a rookie. Besides, this was also his last mission. He hoped that after he completed it, he and Shasha would be sent back to Pangea, where their family would be waiting for their return. How many are left? A handsome teenage boy with blonde hair and gray eyes asked. 14 remain, young Master Kane. A teenage boy wearing glasses replied. Kane clicked his tongue. If possible, he wanted all the Wanderers to join his side. He believed that once Shasha lost all of the members of her team, she would have no choice but to join his team in order to survive in Solterra. How was the hunt? Kane asked his other subordinate who had short brown hair and brown eyes. We hunted down 5 rank 1 boars today, young master, the brown-haired teenager replied. Everyone will have enough food to eat for a few days. Kane nodded. Make sure that those who got injured are treated. They are now part of our group, so we need to make sure that none of them die. Yes, young master. The brown-haired boy nodded in understanding. Young master, are you sure that this is the right way to do this? The boy with black hair and wearing glasses asked. The princess might hate you if you keep on trying to absorb her team. She already hates me, so making her hate me more wouldn't make a difference, Kane replied before sighing. Tell me, why do you think she doesn't like me? Am I not handsome enough? Am I not influential enough? Of course, you are worthy of her, young master, the teenage boy wearing glasses replied. But most of the time, using a very aggressive approach to win the heart of a lady isn't effective. Instead of getting closer, it might make her want to run away. Then what should I do? Maybe you need to talk to her personally and try to reach a truce or something? As one of the scions of a monarch clan, Kane had all the qualifications to make any girl around him swoon. In fact, all the teenage girls on his team were doing their best to catch his attention. If they happened to become his lover or even his future concubine, they would no longer have to worry about hardships in Solterra or Pangea. Unfortunately for them, Kane only had eyes for Shasha. You could even say that it was love at first sight. During one of the parties hosted by the Stallard clan, the members of the young generation who came from the other monarch families, as well as the 10 prestigious families, had arrived to participate in the festivities. Although there were many beautiful, strong young ladies in the party, Kane didn't feel anything towards them. Only when he left the hall to take a breather in the garden did he see the most beautiful girl in his life. A young lady wearing a white dress stood beside the fountain in silence, bathing in the moonlight. Kane could have sworn that her body was faintly glowing in the darkness, like a princess who had stepped out of a painting. This was also why Kane always referred to her as princess. In his eyes, she was the one and only princess. As years went by, he had plenty of opportunities to interact with Shasha, mostly at the parties meant for the most influential people in Pangea. It was also there when he realized that he wasn't the only one paying close attention to the girl who had stolen his heart. Several other teenage boys from the monarch clans, as well as the other prestigious families, were also eyeing Shasha, making him extremely jealous and desperate. During one of those parties, he made a declaration that he would be marrying Shasha once she had come of age, not caring about the consequences that would follow such a declaration. No one directly said anything to him because he was still a scion of the Stallard family. But he could tell that his declaration wasn't taken seriously by the adults, as well as the other boys who were interested in Shasha. Since then, the young lady no longer attended any of the parties, making Cain feel heartbroken. So the moment he saw her in the same place as him in Solterra, he thought that it was fate. He thought that he was finally given the chance by the one to become closer to his crush and hopefully get a few steps ahead of his rivals, who were also vying for her attention. Although he also felt like he was rushing things, he asked Shasha to become his girlfriend, promising that he would do everything in his power to protect her and ensure that they would safely return to Pangea. However, the young lady of his dreams firmly rejected his proposal. But instead of feeling depressed, it only made Cain like her even more. His father once said that all is fair in love and war. If he wanted something, he should do everything in his power to get it. So, Cain did what he could and tried to poach Shasha's members one by one. Of course, the members he poached weren't treated badly. In fact, he made sure that they were treated fairly, just as good as those who had decided to follow him at the very start. He wanted to show Shasha that he wasn't like those other arrogant young masters from the monarch clans. What Cain wanted was a chance to prove that he was serious about her, and that he only wanted the two of them to get to know each other better. Unfortunately, he wasn't the type of person who liked to beat around the bush, so he didn't think twice before asking if she could become his girlfriend. This was his first time falling in love with someone, so he really didn't know what to do. He only did the only thing he thought would work, and that was to make Shasha dependent on him. You're right. Maybe my approach is wrong. Cain crossed his arms over his chest. Maybe I'm not doing this properly. Don't worry, young master. The teenage boy with glasses patted Cain's shoulder. Since we all have the same mission, there will be plenty of opportunities to work together. I'm sure that once the princess realizes that working together will raise the chances of success in completing the mission, she will definitely see your good points. Cain, who felt that what his subordinate said was the truth, felt a little better. Okay, tomorrow I will personally visit her and try to make amends, Cain declared. I will not rush things this time and take it slowly. The teenage boy with glasses nodded his head and gave his young master a thumbs up. Cain wasn't aware that an overprotective younger brother had arrived at the scene and was already thinking of ways to torture him once they met so that he would leave his precious sister alone. For the first time since she had arrived in Solterra, Shasha was finally able to sleep soundly. It had been a few months since she and the other wanderers had been sent to a place that was very far from the major human kingdoms, where the 5 monarch clans and the 10 prestigious families were located. Every day was a fight for survival, so her sleep was very shallow, ready to wake up at a moment's notice. But after her brother appeared in front of her, she once again felt safe enough to sleep without the need to keep a weapon beside her. Right now, the beautiful teenage girl was sleeping peacefully in Giga Chad's soft fur, which was way better than the makeshift bed filled with leaves that she used as her bed. She was even hugging 13 in her sleep like a teddy bear. 13, on the other hand, didn't mind letting his sister do as she pleased. He noticed that she had become a little thinner and more haggard since the last time he saw her, proving that her first adventure in Solterra wasn't an easy one. The 10-year-old didn't tell his sister about the hardships that he had to endure in order to reach her location. He was just doing his trials, and his 12th trial was to reach the place called Arcadia Archipelago. It took him 3 months to get there by sea, and when he arrived, he just happened to find his sister after hearing Visego's report that there were teenagers being attacked by a bear monster in the forest. Similar to the Valbera Archipelago, the Arcadia Haven was a very large archipelago with 4 main islands forming a long line. These islands were Dubhe, Merak, Fekta, and Alcade. Currently, 13 was on the second island, Merak, which had a vast swath of forest spanning for miles on end. Bordering it was a valley, which had picturesque features. It was also the place that Cain and his team of wanderers were using as their base of operations. Shasha, on the other hand, was forced to look for her own base of operations in the forest, where she and the other wanderers could rest without worrying about being attacked by powerful monsters. The funny thing was that the cave where they were currently at had been used by other wanderers in the past. It was hidden behind a waterfall and even had an escape route in case a monster forced itself inside the cave. This escape route was very narrow, and only teenage boys and girls could pass through it. It led to the other side of the mountain where the valley was located. With this means of escape, Shasha and the other wanderers had made the cave their base and had been living in it for the past few months. Cain's team had a similar base, which was also used by other wanderers in the past. It was quite funny knowing that the things that were left behind by the other wanderers were keeping the next generation safe. Tiona softly hissed in 13th's ear, telling him that a pack of rank 2 wolves was heading towards their cave. "Thank you," Tiona, 13, replied, but he didn't make a move to do anything. The reason? Because there was no need to do anything. A few minutes later, the sound of howling, growling, and roaring spread inside the cave, waking all the wanderers from their slumber. Even Shasha, who had been sleeping soundly a while ago, opened her eyes and immediately stood up. "Brother," Shasha said with a solemn expression on her face. "It's fine," 13 replied. "Let's go out and see if those wolves have already been taken care of." The 10-year-old walked towards the cave entrance, with Shasha following a step behind him. The other wanderers also joined, holding their weapons, ready to fight if necessary. When they left the cave and walked past the waterfall, a scene that they never expected to see was happening right in front of their eyes. The moons of Solterra were bright, so the surroundings were well illuminated. A tigerkin was surrounded by over a dozen wolves, and all of them were growling at him. Several wolves lay on the ground, either unconscious or groaning in pain due to their broken legs that made them unable to stand up. Percival, who was completely surrounded, had a grin on his face because although he was outnumbered, he was confident that he would be able to defeat these wolves one by one without any problems. His hands and feet were covered in golden flames, enhancing his speed, strength, agility, and dexterity. Simply put, as long as he didn't stand still, it was nearly impossible for mere rank 2 monsters to land a blow on his body. With a yelp of pain, the wolf nearest Percival was kicked in the chin and was sent flying backwards. The other wolves took this opportunity to lunge at the tigerkin, but the latter casually dodged all the attacks and delivered his own counterattack when an opportunity presented itself. His attacks would either land on the wolf's head, jaw, or leg, rendering them unconscious, dead, or crippled. After 3 years of following 13, the tigerkin had truly mastered his martial technique, Emperor's Might, which was created by a lionkin who wished to become the next king of beasts. Seeing that it was impossible to win, the rank 2 alpha wolf howled, which signaled their retreat. Percival rubbed his nose and watched the wolves flee with their tails tucked between their legs. At that exact moment, the tigerkin heard a voice that was coming from behind him. "Not bad, Taiga," 13 said with a smile. "You did well." "Of course, master," Taiga replied before turning around to look at the 10-year-old, whom he had accompanied on a journey filled with ups and downs. "This much is no thee." Percival wasn't able to say the rest of his words because the moment he turned around to look at his master, his gaze also landed on the beautiful young lady standing beside him. Shasha's body was glowing faintly in the moonlight, making her look surreal. Her long blonde hair and green eyes that looked similar to his master, Zion, caught his attention, making him forget how to breathe for a few seconds. Seeing his reaction, 13 couldn't help but chuckle inside his heart, because it was very obvious that the tigerkin had become one of the victims of his sister's beauty. "Everyone, this is my disciple, Taiga," 13 introduced the tigerkin to everyone. "Hello, just call me Taiga," Percival said, no longer caring about what name 13 planned to call him, "or any name that you wish to call me by." After knowing that the beautiful teenage girl was his master's sister, Percival did his best to be in his best behavior because he knew that if he did something out of line, 13 would make sure that he suffered for it. Shasha also introduced herself, but didn't elaborate any further. She was already used to people looking at her with the same heated gaze that the Tigerkin was giving her. In fact, this was the reason why the other teenage boys in Shasha's team had chosen to stay with her instead of joining Kane's team. Shasha, kill those wolves that Taiga left alive, 13 ordered. Yes, brother, Shasha replied and did as she was told. There were 7 wolves that Percival had knocked unconscious, so Shasha simply stabbed them with the sword in her possession. After killing them all, she received 2 items, and one of them was a wolf avatar. The other was a dagger with the insignia of a wolf on its handle. It was a dagger that would return to its owner once it was thrown, making it a very useful throwing weapon. We're going back to sleep, so make sure that those wolves bleed out so we can cook them tomorrow, Taiga. Yes, master. Percival pounded his chest as if to assure him that everything would be done according to his orders. 13 then held Shasha's hand and pulled her back to the cave so that they could go back to sleep. Several hours later, when 13 opened his eyes, he found his sister still sleeping beside him. The other wanderers were already awake and busy grilling some of the bear's meat that they would turn into jerky later on. Miriam, on the other hand, was busy cooking meat stew using the vegetables that Zion had given her. She knew how to cook and was very good at it because she helped a lot in the orphanage where she grew up. Since 13 had given them a lot of ingredients like salt and other spices, she was finally able to put her skills to the test. 13 even gave her pots, pans, ladles, and other cooking utensils, making her the official cook of their team. The younger boy gently pried Shasha's hands off his body so that she wouldn't wake up. Today was going to be a busy day because he would need to help the wanderers stock up on their food supplies. He had already asked Visago and Poca to scout the surroundings to see if there were any dangerous monsters that they needed to keep an eye on. The 2 Pocos were already used to this kind of thing, so they scouted the island overnight. Percival was not in the cave when 13 woke up, but he had an idea where the Tigerkin went. He had assigned Taiga to keep watch over their ship and only follow him after they had properly anchored it. The 10 trolls and the 2 ogres, who had become part of 13's private army, were also on the ship and had already learned how to operate it properly. Rocky, Blackie, and Hercules were on the ship and were tasked to guard it. During the past 3 years, everyone that had followed 13 had become battle-hardened monsters. The 2 ogres and the leader of the trolls, T1, had become rank 4 sovereigns. The rest of the trolls had become rank 4 alpha monsters, showing how much they had grown over the past 3 years. Giga, Blackie, and Hercules had now become rank 5 sovereigns, making them very powerful monsters. Rocky, on the other hand, was now a bona fide rank 6 sovereign, and he was also the strongest monster in 13's army. Their explosive growth was attributed to eating the rank 9 fire dragon's meat and blood, which Rocky had stored inside his body, allowing 13's group to monopolize it. The dragon scales, horns, claws, teeth, and other important body parts were also stored properly because he intended to bring them back to Pangea. 13 already had a plan in mind for how he would be using the dragon scales. He would not be giving them to his father to turn it into armor or artifacts, because he had a better use for it. The only thing that he planned to give his father were the dragon's teeth, claws, horns, and other parts that he deemed that he wouldn't need for his personal use. 13 believed that, even if he didn't do anything, his father would be able to craft a mythical item, just because of the quality of materials he would be using. There was only one instance when a rank 9 sovereign was killed in Pangea. It was also the event that allowed the 5 traitors to become monarchs, allowing them to become the strongest pillars of humanity. 13 planned to keep everything under wraps because once people knew about the fire dragon monster parts, things could become extremely dicey for him and his family. 2 hours later, a commotion happened inside the cave. A group of wanderers, headed by a handsome teenage boy, made their way inside to look for Shasha. Fortunately, she had woken up and had already eaten breakfast by the time they arrived. 13 looked at the person standing in front of the group and almost face-palmed the moment his gaze landed on Cain Stallard, who was one of the heirs of the Stallard clan. Earlier, the Wanderers following Cain were feeling smug because they were now part of the popular group. However, when their gaze landed on Giga Chad, who was happily eating bear stew from a large wooden bowl, all of them froze in shock. They could tell that the monster, who was seated behind Shasha, was not a low-rank monster, making them more timid than usual. Cain, although also shaken, didn't make it appear on his face. He simply looked at his crush with an affectionate gaze before shifting his attention to the boy that was standing beside her. "Who are you?" Cain asked. "I have never seen you before." Taiga, who had also just returned inside the cave after checking their ship, noticed the commotion and walked towards his master. He could tell that the newcomers were weaker than him, so he didn't do anything that might hurt them. Shasha stood beside her brother and looked Cain in the eye. "This is my little brother Zion," Shasha replied. "You once asked me to become your girlfriend, right?" "Yes," Cain answered in a heartbeat. Even now, that feeling hasn't changed. Taiga's ears perked up after hearing that the handsome human boy was courting his master's sister. "Well, I will now give you my answer," Shasha stated. "The only one whom I will accept as my lover is the person who has gained Zion's approval." After hearing Shasha's reply, Cain fearlessly walked towards 13 with a serious expression on his face. A moment later, he grabbed hold of 13's right hand and knelt in front of him. "Brother, I will follow you for life," Cain declared. Taiga, who didn't plan on losing out, instantly appeared in front of 13 at the blink of an eye and held his left hand. He also knelt in front of the 10-year-old and looked at him with an unwavering gaze. "Master, I will serve you forever," Percival stated. 13 smiled calmly at the two teenagers in front of him. A moment later, he opened his mouth and gave Tiona an order. "Tiona, bite these two fools," 13 ordered. The black snake hissed and lunged at Percival, who hurriedly ran away. Cain recognized that the black snake coiled around the younger boy's neck as a Domini Mortis, which was classified as the most venomous rank 1 monster in existence. With the threat of getting bitten to death, Cain followed Percival and ran away as fast as he could, causing Shasha to show something that she rarely did. The young lady giggled, which was something that she hadn't done ever since she had arrived in Solterra. Even her teammates were caught by surprise because they had never seen Shasha act like this. She almost always had a calm and collected look on her face, so seeing her act like a girl made them all feel that there was still a lot more that they didn't know about their temporary leader. 13, on the other hand, sighed in his heart. He had a feeling that things would get a little more hectic now that the balance of power between the two Wanderer teams had shifted in Shasha's favor. "Tell me, how did this happen again?" 13 asked his sister, who was seated beside him. "I'm not so sure either." Shasha blinked innocently. Just like her brother, she had no idea why Cain suddenly decided to bring his people to merge with her own group of Wanderers. Only a day had passed since Cain had come to see Shasha and left. But the very next day, he came back, and he didn't come alone. He brought his entire team with him, which made the cave where Shasha and her team were staying quite crowded. All in all, there were over 50 Wanderers inside the cave, and all of them were looking at the 10-year-old with great curiosity. "Brother, what are we going to do today?" Cain asked in a respectful tone. "For now, I'm thinking of stocking up on food supplies," 13 replied. "I see." Cain nodded in understanding. "So we're going hunting today." The young man then called out his subordinates who specialized in fighting and told them that they would enter the forest to hunt. Taiga, who didn't want to be left out, walked toward the exit of the cave with brisk steps. Clearly, he also planned to go hunting since that was what his master wanted to do today. Also, he would make sure that he'd hunt more than Cain's group so that Shasha would think of him as a very dependable person. The Tigerkins and the heir of the Stallard clans' gazes met. Both of them smiled at each other. But deep inside, the two of them understood that they were about to compete for Shasha's attention. 13 watched this exchange with an amused expression on his face. How could he possibly not know what these two fools were thinking? But he didn't do anything to stop them. After all, being productive was better than being unproductive. Right now, he was waiting for Visego and Polka to come back to give their report. He didn't want to wander around the islands blindly, not wanting to encounter the lord of the Arcadia archipelago. Cranky was the current lord of the Valbera archipelago, and according to the letters sent to him by Taiga's mother, Briella, the rank 8 sovereign had made 13's monument his den. Whenever Cranky wasn't hunting, it would rest a few meters away from the boy's statue, which was often visited by pilgrims from all over the Valbera archipelago. Barbarians, tigerkins, orcs, ogres, trolls, as well as the other races, would go there to pray and make their wishes. When their land was in danger, there was no deity who cared about them. However, 13 did. So instead of praying to Fornius, who no longer cared about them, or Mammon, who only wanted their gold, they decided to make the young boy their spiritual pillar. 13 didn't know if he should be happy or not at this turn of events. He didn't even know if there would be another opportunity to return to the Valbera archipelago. Of course, the other races knew this as well. But since even the Lord of the Warzur Plains protected the pilgrims who visited the hero's monument, their desire to worship the boy only strengthened in their hearts. Just as 13 was thinking along these lines, 2 birds descended from the sky and landed on the log where he and Shasha were sitting. "Welcome back, Visego, Poka," 13 said before taking out 4 wooden bowls from his spatial storage. He filled 2 bowls with nuts and the other 2 with water. The boy knew that the 2 Pocos were tired from their mission, so he decided to let them eat and drink to their fill before hearing their report. Shasha, who recognized what kind of birds they were, looked at them with great curiosity. "Brother, are these Pocos?" Shasha asked. "Aren't they very mischievous birds?" But these 2 seemed different somehow. "They are indeed mischievous," 13 replied. "But without their help, I would have a hard time surviving in this world." Visego's agreement with him had already come to an end. However, the Poco chose to remain with him and even stated that he would wait until 13 had returned safely to Pangea before returning to visit his friends in the birthplace of the Pocos. Poca, who didn't have a contract with 13, decided to continue tagging along on the journey as well. Perhaps after participating in the epic battle against the Magian Prince, Arundel, she thought that being with the younger boy would be very exciting and entertaining. So, just like Visego, she said that she would wait until 13 had completed his last mission before she went with Visego back to their birthplace. Half an hour later, the 2 Pocos started chirping. Since 13 could understand any language in the world, it was more convenient for them to talk in this manner. Aside from that, it allowed them to keep their cover as well. After listening to the report of the 2 Pocos, a frown appeared on 13's face. According to them, there were 2 rank 8 sovereigns present in the Arcadia archipelago. One of them was a rank 8 unicorn, and the other was a rank 8 beholder. The beholder was actually a Magian who ruled the 4th island of the archipelago called Unscathed. The unicorn, on the other hand, lived on the 1st island, Dubhi. Currently, 13 and the other wanderers were in the 2nd island, Merak. The unicorn was the closest to their location, and 13 had no plans to meet with such a powerful beast that could easily annihilate his people one by one. But he didn't plan on meeting the beholder either. As a Magian, it was very fond of eating wanderers. Of course, not all Magians ate humans. Some even liked to socialize with the latter to a certain extent, allowing peaceful coexistence with each other. When he asked the 2 Pocos if they saw any gate-like structures, or any structure for that matter, the 2 replied that they saw 2 pyramid-like structures in the place where the 2 sovereigns lived. After hearing this information, 13 couldn't help but groan, knowing that this was the worst-case scenario possible. He didn't have to deal with 1 rank 8 sovereign, but 2. Both were equally dangerous and posed a serious threat to their lives. "I should have brought the Grand Ballista with me," 13 muttered helplessly. After the battle with Arundel ended, Arthas, the Tigerkin King, and the Ogre King asked if he could leave the Grand Ballista behind as a relic of the war. Since he had a feeling that the Ogre King would eat him if he refused, he decided to agree and allowed the 3 kings to take the Grand Ballista to the 3rd island for safekeeping. Although Fornius had already abandoned them, the 3rd island was still a sacred place to them, and they wouldn't desecrate it no matter what. How should I handle this? 13 rubbed his chin as he pondered his next move. He didn't doubt that the information he needed could be found inside the two pyramids, which definitely held a special purpose in the Arcadia archipelago. One last thing, Zion Visego chirped. I also found dozens of teenagers on each island. I saw them too. Polka joined the conversation. There are many kids here. On the first island, I estimate that there's around 100 of them. The third island and fourth island may not have that many, but I think there were around 50 of them. There could be more, though. I only counted those who were actively hunting monsters. The more 13 listened, the deeper his frown became. Usually, the more wanderers there were in the same place, the more difficult the mission was. Shasha didn't know what her brother and the two Pokopokos were talking about, but she could tell by the frown on his face that the situation was serious. Frubnov.com. Zion, what's wrong? Shasha asked. Are we in danger? Not yet, 13 replied in a heartbeat. I still need to investigate a few things first to better understand the situation. Aside from the two rank 8 sovereigns, there were also several strong monsters in the island that they were currently on. However, unlike those two threats, 13 could deal with the monsters here easily since he had enough manpower to do it. For the time being, he decided to come up with a plan that would allow him to meet with the other wanderers on the other islands. Only after accomplishing that would he start checking out the two pyramids, which were being guarded by two powerful monsters. Somewhere in Solterra, Lancaster City was a bustling city free from the control of the 5 monarch clans and the 10 prestigious families. It was part of the Essex Kingdom, which was ruled by a monarch of Solterra. That day was as peaceful as always, but not until something unexpected happened. From within the portal, a person who hadn't been seen for many years made his appearance. Even though it had been a long time since he was last seen in the city, it wouldn't change the fact that many people still recognized him for the kindness he had shown. Long time no see. Gerald, one of the guards who were protecting the gate, looked at Gerald with a smile. I thought you had kicked the bucket since your injuries last time were serious. It's nice to see you too, Ryan. Gerald chuckled as he patted his friend's shoulder. Tell me, have you married Susan yet? Not yet, Ryan replied with a bitter smile on his face. Her father doesn't like me. Then make him like you. I can't. I hate him too. Gerald smirked. Well then, do your best to get close to that old man. I still have something to take care of. However, Ryan grabbed hold of Gerald's arm, holding him in place. Gerald, you should go back to the teleportation gate, Ryan advised solemnly. I'm sure that by now, news about your reappearance here in Lancaster City is already spreading. It's only a matter of time before they reach Death Wish. Zion's father smiled faintly, touched by Ryan's sincerity and friendship. Don't worry, Ryan, Gerald commented. I will just stay long enough to buy a few things before I go. Then you better hurry, Ryan urged. No one escapes Death Wish twice. Gerald nodded and went on his way. But instead of hurrying like he was told, he walked at a leisurely pace, as if he was just taking a stroll in the town. He visited a few places, especially the shops that sold monster parts and metals. Although he could buy monster parts from the Levinas family, there were certain monster parts that he needed that could only be obtained in Lancaster Town. Everywhere Gerald went, people who knew him urged that he leave the city as fast as possible. There was even an old lady who threatened to whack him with her cane if he dilly-dallied in his shopping. The more he interacted with the people of Lancaster City, the more he missed the times when he explored the ruins of Solterra. Everything came to an end the day he was targeted by Death Wish for reasons he didn't know about. A part of him was sad that he was forced to stop doing something he liked to do. The other half, on the other hand, was quite thankful. After all, if not for that incident, he would have not picked up the hammer and tried his hand in blacksmithing. Although he didn't want to admit it, Gerald found creating things very fun and exciting. This new joy, which hadn't faded over the years, only grew his desire to craft a mythical weapon of his own without relying on his son's abilities. After buying everything he needed, including a few souvenirs for Alessia and Remy, who were waiting for him back home, Gerald walked back toward the teleportation gate. But as he walked the streets leading to the teleportation gate, he found the atmosphere had suddenly become tense. The people weren't walking all over the place as usual, and all of them positioned themselves at the sides of the road, looking at Gerald with varying expressions on their faces. I see, Gerald thought. They're finally here. When he arrived at the teleportation gate, there was not even a single person standing around it. The guards, who were usually stationed to ensure that there wouldn't be any dangerous things happening near the gate, were nowhere to be seen. Gerald walked calmly toward the deserted plaza while humming a happy tune. When he was only dozens of meters away from the teleportation gate, he felt countless presences charging in his direction from every direction with the intent to kill. Knowing that the moment of truth had arrived, Gerald summoned a giant hammer, which he had personally forged, and swung it around. The sound of metal clashing reverberated in the surroundings as he successfully deflected the attacks of 6 assassins who had come to attack him in broad daylight. But they were not the only assassins who had come to take his life. More assassins came out of hiding and encircled their target with weapons drawn. 20 people, Gerald mused. 4 champions, and the rest are grandmasters. They're really serious this time. This lineup was more than enough to kill a mere grandmaster 20 times over. Perhaps knowing that their prey had nowhere to run, one of the assassins took a step forward. "You should have stayed away from this place," Gerald Leventis, one of the champion assassins, stated. "No one escapes death wish twice." "Really?" Gerald chuckled. "We'll see about that." After saying those words, Gerald made a mad dash towards the teleportation gate, prompting the assassins to attack him at the same time. No matter what happened, they would not allow Gerald to escape, for their reputation was at stake. The 4 champions moved in unison and went for the kill, targeting different vital parts of Gerald's body. As long as one of their attacks landed, the man who managed to escape their assassination in the past would meet his end today. But just as their weapons collided with Gerald's body, they heard a metallic clinking sound, making them feel as if they had stabbed something hard. However, before they could even understand why their killing blows didn't manage to pierce Gerald's clothes, his hammer smashed against the face of one of the champions, making the latter cry out in pain. "Heaven's overdrive," Gerald said in a cold tone. Soon, his strength, speed, agility, and dexterity rose drastically. The eyes of the 3 remaining champions widened in shock because they finally realized that their target was no longer a grandmaster. After completing the mission of lighting the beacon of hope in the Valbera archipelago, Gerald had finally stepped into the champion rank. Also, due to his contributions, he received a lot of rewards from the One, allowing him to gain enough confidence to return to Solterra and pay back the organization, who almost took everything for him. Together, the leader of the assassins roared as the other champions unleashed their full powers in order to fight their targets seriously. Unfortunately for them, Gerald was no ordinary champion. He was a champion who was in possession of a divine martial technique. Hammer for all seasons, final form. Gerald roared as he swung his hammer, preparing to counter the combined attacks of the 4 assassins at the same time. Fortress Breaker. The giant hammer in his hands was coated with golden flames, multiplying his attack several folds. The moment his weapon and the weapons of the assassins clashed, their daggers and swords shattered on impact. But that wasn't all. Gerald's strike could already smash the defensive walls of a fortress. So how could they possibly deal with an attack that was augmented by his berserk skill, Heaven's Overdrive? A loud cracking sound was heard as the bodies of the assassins were hit directly by Gerald's hammer. Blood gushed out from their mouths before all of them were sent flying by the attack that could end their life. But Gerald's strike was still not over. Using the momentum of his strike, he swung his hammer around and hit the assassins behind him. Unlike the champions, the rest of the assassins were just grandmasters. Faced with such a deadly attack, their lives flashed before their very eyes. A moment later, all of them were annihilated. Their bones and organs were crushed by the impact of Gerald's hammer. As if he was possessed, Zion's father went on a killing spree, making sure that all the assassins that he could see died in his hands. Even the champions who managed to survive his attacks the first time weren't able to escape it a second time. When everything was over, Gerald scanned the surroundings and saw one more assassin in the distance. He was smaller than the others, which made him think that he was just a new recruit that was only sent to observe the assassination mission. "Tell your superiors that your organization's myth has ended," Gerald said as he walked towards the teleportation gate. Whoever said no one escapes a death wish twice must have been piss drunk when he said it. If you people have a death wish, come and find me. I'll send you all to the afterlife. After saying those words, Gerald finally entered the portal with a smug look on his face. On that same day, news of what happened in Lancaster City traveled far and wide. For the first time in the history of Solterra, someone managed to survive the second assassination attempt of the most notorious assassination organization in the world. Not only did Gerald survive, but he also annihilated all the assassins that came after him. Now that the organization's myth, stating that nobody could escape their assassination twice, had finally been broken, Death Wish lost a bit of their influence. This news would soon reach not only the far reaches of Solterra, but Pangea as well. Gerald's name would once again be the talk of the town, and this time, they would not be words of ridicule, but words of awe and admiration. While 13 was busy planning on how to get his sister back home to Pangea, news of what Gerald did appeared on the front page of the popular newspaper Solterra Times. This was managed by one of the most credible information guilds in Solterra that was under the management of Wanderers. Any news of great importance that happened in Solterra would be compiled and published in Pangea. Originally, the plan was to let newspapers become the norm in Solterra as well. However, Laplace Demon put his foot down, preventing anyone from opening a newspaper company in his backyard. Because of this, the Wanderers no longer insisted on doing something like it, and simply brought back the news in their own world. In fact, the news spread faster in Pangea because the technology used there was higher compared to Solterra. Gerald's one-sided massacre of the assassins from Death Wish became sensational news. However, not many people were happy about it. One of those unhappy people was none other than Arthur Leventis. He didn't know who had ordered the assassination attempt on the black sheep of his family. But he was sure of one thing. From this day onwards, Gerald and Death Wish would never be able to live under the same sky. The patriarch of the Leventis family was starting to worry that his family members, as well as their branch families, would be targeted by the assassin organization because of what Gerald had done. Not only did he kill the assassins who had come to assassinate him, he even gave Death Wish a big middle finger, making them the laughing stock of the two worlds. Why can't he just sit still? Arthur sighed helplessly. If only he had been the one that accompanied 13 in Solterra instead of Gerald, he would have been a monarch by now. With his newfound power and influence, he believed that Death Wish would no longer target his son because they would be afraid of his counterattack. Right now, Arthur was just a throne. Although Gerald had backing, they didn't think much of him because his father was just a throne. It was a well-known fact that the head of the assassin organization was also a throne. A throne against a throne could go either way, so the chances of them fighting each other was slim. If Arthur was a monarch, then they wouldn't have accepted Gerald's assassination request, even if they were paid a high price for it. Tell our people in Solterra to be on high alert, Arthur ordered. Make sure that they always travel in groups and don't stray too far from our territory. Michael nodded in understanding and went to their family's teleportation gate to travel to Solterra. While Arthur was worrying about the potential repercussions of Gerald's antics, the man in question was laughing out loud while reading the newspaper about him. "Do you see this, Alessia?" Gerald asked as he showed his wife the front page of the newspaper. "Your husband is popular right now." Instead of being happy, Alessia only glared at him because Gerald didn't tell her that he had gone to Solterra in order to get revenge on Death Wish. If she only knew what her husband intended to do, she would have tied him up with a rope and locked him up inside their bunker. "What are you being so happy about?" Alessia snapped. "What if you had died? Would you still be smiling then?" Seeing that his wife didn't like the news of him killing the assassins from Death Wish, Gerald didn't hesitate to take a step back and pacify her. "Alessia, you know more than anyone that I don't intend on dying," Gerald replied. "The fact that I went to Solterra to challenge Death Wish meant that I was 100% confident that I could survive a battle against them." "But what if you hadn't?" Alessia asked. "What if something unexpected happened? What if their leader had personally come to kill you? Would you have been able to survive his assassination?" "Yes," Gerald replied in a heartbeat, which took Alessia by surprise. Gerald then equipped the fire dragon armor that he had gained after getting the last hit on the rank 9 sovereign. This is a mythical ranked equipment. Alessia, Gerald stated. It is the reward that I gained after facing off against a rank 9 sovereign. Originally, I should not have been able to wear something of this rank since I was just a grandmaster back then. But for some reason, the requirements for equipping it was lowered to my rank and is even soul-bounded to me. Even if a throne was there, he would not be able to kill me so easily because of my armor. This is also the reason why I felt confident that I would be able to return safely. I already thought of every other variable, and after thinking of all the worst-case scenarios, each of them ended with me surviving and coming back home. Alessia, who had heard Gerald's explanation, softened a bit because she could tell that her husband truly made sure that he had taken everything into consideration before going back to Solterra. His goal was to let everyone know that Death Wish would not be able to kill him a second time, which was a slap to their faces. It was Gerald's own way of rebelling and telling the world, especially those who ridiculed him, that he was still the genius of the Levinas family. Lastly, he did it in order to smoke out the person who had placed the assassination kill order for him. The moment he survived the second assassination, the assassin group would then face their employer, who hadn't informed them that their target was no longer a grandmaster, but a champion. This was a breach of contract, as well as breach in information. If they only knew that Gerald was a champion, the head of their organization would have personally made a move to kill him, instead of sending 5 champions and 15 grandmasters to do the job. Gerald was looking forward to the drama that would follow afterwards. He had managed to kill many of the assassins under Death Wish, and these losses weren't something that could be replaced in a short period of time. Without a doubt, the leader of the assassins would ask for a proper explanation and compensation from their employer. Whoever you are, I'm sure you will not get out of this unscathed, Gerald thought as he hugged his wife, who had finally calmed down. Although I don't know how Death Wish will deal with you, I'm sure you will not be able to show your face in Solterra for a while. What Gerald didn't know was that at that very same moment, the one who issued the kill order for him had started to panic. Death Wish took pride in their legend of not letting any of their targets escape twice. Now that this myth was broken, their reputation took a great hit. Since they failed a second time, wouldn't that make them the same as any other assassin organizations in the world? They only became popular because of the high success rate of their missions. But since this was no longer the case, they would do their best to save face and make sure that Gerald, and the one who wished for him to be killed, will be put on the very top of their kill list. On the third island of the Fecta, in the Arcadia archipelago, just like Shasha and Cain, there were 2 groups of wanderers on the island. The first group was led by a teenage boy who came from one of the prestigious families, and the other group was led by a girl who hailed from a military family. Visago and Poca had observed these 2 groups from a distance and informed their master about their personalities. Visago was watching over the boy whose name was Herman Nightshade, while Poca observed the girl whom everyone in her team referred to as Phoebe. Herman's team was composed of over 40 wanderers, while Phoebe's team was composed of 14. Surprisingly, the bigger group didn't antagonize the smaller group, and they even helped each other occasionally. Even so, both of their bases were at least a mile away from each other, occupying strategic locations, which had also been used by wanderers in the past. After hearing this piece of news, 13 started to wonder if the 2 pyramids, which weren't inside his database, were created by wanderers during the 300 years that he was away from the world of Pangea and Solterra. Of course, this explanation was a long shot because kids couldn't possibly create such structures on their own. If that was the case, then there could only be one explanation. Someone, or a group of people, who held considerable influence and power, had created the pyramids for a purpose. As to what that purpose was, 13 had no idea. He would need to infiltrate these 2 pyramids first to better understand what they were used for. But before he did that, he planned to make contact with the rest of the wanderers who were on the 4 islands of the Arcadia archipelago. Although their enemy wasn't as strong as a Magian prince, fighting against a rank 8 sovereign was pure suicide. Even with 13's mercenary group, there was simply no way that they could fight against such an existence. Also, after what happened in the battle with Arundel, 13 no longer treated the monsters under his command as disposable troops. They had fought alongside him during the war and even died trying to protect him. 13 would never betray those who had given their lives for him, so he treated them well during the 3 years that they were together. Instead of letting them upgrade to become normal rank 4, rank 5, and rank 6 monsters, he made sure to tweak their fates a bit and make them powerful monsters in their own right. O1, O2, and T1 were now rank 4 sovereigns. The rest of the trolls had become alpha monsters, which was something that didn't happen easily. In order to become an alpha, overlord, and sovereign, there were strict conditions that needed to be met. Just like how the golden-eyed hyena evolved into the diabolical hyena by cannibalizing its own kind, 13 made sure that all of his subordinates became the stronger version of themselves. In order for T1 to become a sovereign, he needed to lead a group of trolls to do some kind of mission. After that mission was done, he became something that he wasn't supposed to be, breaking through the ranks of sovereign. Simply put, 13 changed his fate from being an ordinary monster to a boss monster. Unfortunately, it was impossible to make all the trolls become sovereigns because they should always be led by someone. However, it was not impossible for them to become alpha monsters. So, 13 made sure that they all became alpha monsters. When 13 planned to give them all proper names, the ogres and the trolls told him that their names were fine. For them, the younger boy was someone that they learned to respect and admire, so they cherished the names that he gave them, even if it was just done on a whim. Percival had also gotten used to 13, calling him Taiga. Just like the ogres and the trolls, he now took pride in his name because it was the name that was given to him by the hero of the Valbera archipelago. In short, it was a great honor being named by him. As Polka was observing Phoebe's group, she noticed that the trees were shaking in the distance. Soon, she and the wanderers heard it, the sound of countless hooves running through the forest, and they were running in their direction. "Everyone, back to the base," Phoebe ordered, and all the wanderers, who were just about to go hunt their food for the day, all ran as fast as they could. Unlike Shasha's base, which was inside a cave, Phoebe's group stayed inside a treehouse, which was built in one of the biggest trees in the forest. The treehouse couldn't be seen from above the trees, and several vines hid it from below. These vines gave off a smelly odor, which prevented animals and monsters from getting too close to it. Fortunately, we didn't go too far, Phoebe thought, as she and the other wanderers were able to climb into their treehouse safely. Holding her breath, she parted a few vines to get a better look on what was happening outside. There, she saw countless monsters running away from a horde of goblins. A monster stampede. Phoebe's face turned pale after realizing what was happening. Alone, a goblin wasn't that much of a threat because it was just a rank 1 monster. However, if there were hundreds of them, even rank 3 monsters would have a hard time if they were attacked by a swarm of rank 1 monsters. Since a frontal confrontation was impossible, the monsters did the only thing they could do, and that was to run. Perhaps due to their crazed state, the monsters no longer cared where they were running, as long as they could get away from the monster horde behind them. Phoebe could only watch in horror as the vines that were hiding their treehouse from sight parted as the monsters ran past it, destroying most of them in the process. The goblins, who were running after the monsters, saw the treehouse, as well as the humans in it. Phoebe's group shuddered in fright as the goblins laughed wildly and pointed in their direction. Soon, dozens of goblins ran towards the tree and attempted to climb it. "Everyone, shoot them down," Phoebe ordered. She knew that if the goblins were to grab hold of them, they would suffer a fate worse than death. Goblins were known to prey on human and demi-human women because this was one of the ways that allowed them to reproduce at a rapid rate. Phoebe didn't want to think about what was going to happen to her and the girls on her team if they were overrun by goblins. There were only 14 of them, and dozens of goblins were climbing up the tree. The other goblins were just laughing as they watched the helpless teenagers defend with everything they had. However, it was only a matter of time before they fell into the clutches of these beasts. When the first goblin managed to climb into their treehouse, the girls and boys shouted in fright because they knew that there was no escape for them. Phoebe, on the other hand, slashed the first goblin and kicked the second one off the tree. She didn't plan to go down without a fight, So she planned to take out as many goblins as she could before she was violated by them. Because she was busy fending off the goblins in front of her, she didn't notice those who were at her back. One of the goblins grabbed her hair, pulling her backwards, while the others grabbed her arms and legs. Is this how it's going to end? Phoebe thought as the goblins started to strip off her armor. The other wanderers were in the same situation as her, with the girls even crying and begging for mercy. Suddenly, the head of the goblin that had just finished tearing her armor off of her body fell to the ground. The same thing happened to the other goblins holding her, making her gasp in shock. She thought that the other group of wanderers, led by Herman, had come to her rescue. As she gazed at her surroundings, countless goblins screamed in pain as something fast flew past them. All that Phoebe could see was a blur, but wherever this blur hit, the goblins' heads would be severed from their bodies without mercy. The goblins, who were still climbing up the tree, had no idea what was happening in the treehouse. However, their attention was caught by the sound of countless horns that reverberated in their surroundings. Soon, the trees that were blocking their view were blown away, making all the goblins look at the scene in front of them in shock. A magma Balboa, followed by 2 ogre berserker sovereigns, appeared on the scene. Behind them, the troll warlord and his troll rangers, who were mounted on rank 4 dire wolves, charged in their direction with eyes glinting with expectations. In their eyes, the goblin horde was nothing more than mere experience points, which they needed to become stronger. Rocky didn't head straight into the fight against the goblins. Instead, he allowed his master, who was covered in black metal armor, to jump to the treehouse and help the wanderers who were doing their best to resist the goblins who managed to climb the tree. Tiona, who was the first one to arrive at the scene, sliced off the heads of the goblins by turning her body into a razor-sharp weapon. 13 did the same and killed all the goblins that were within his range. Several minutes later, the treehouse had been cleared of its invaders, and the goblin army on the ground retreated. Although they were powerful, they were still intimidated by the extremely powerful monsters who suddenly appeared out of nowhere. With every swing of the 2 ogres' spiked club, all the goblins they hit turned to meat paste. The alpha trolls, who were also very powerful, started a killing spree, with T1 leading the charge. After depositing 13 on the treehouse, Rocky joined the already one-sided battle, making the goblins retreat en masse. Although they could fight against rank 3 and rank 4 monsters easily, they were unable to fight against a group of them who were fighting together at the same time. 13 walked up to Phoebe and summoned a blanket to cover her body. The goblins had not only managed to rip off her armor, the clothes she was wearing underneath had been ripped to shreds as well. But, aside from a few bruises and scratches, everyone in the treehouse was safe from harm. Phoebe couldn't see the face of her savior because he was wearing a metallic helm that covered his entire face. "Thank you for saving us," Phoebe said with gratitude. "May I know who you are?" 13 glanced at the girl, who was kneeling on the floor with the blanket covering her body before looking at the retreating goblins in the distance. "Zion," 13 replied. "Just call me Zion." After the goblins escaped from 13's mercenary squad, the wanderers were finally able to breathe a little easier. Now that the vines that hid their tree house from the sight of the monsters that roamed the forest were gone, they no longer felt safe staying there. 13, who had plenty of spare clothes in his storage ring, gave the wanderers something to wear because their clothes had been ripped apart by the goblins. Fortunately, none of them died. Even the boys were spare because the goblins didn't think that they were a threat to them. "I have a question, Zion," Phoebe said after making sure that everyone on her team hadn't suffered any serious injuries from the goblin attack. "Do you know someone named Rihanna?" "Yes," 13 replied. "Do you know her?" 13 was quite surprised that Phoebe knew the girl, whom he hadn't seen for the past 3 years after completing the quest in the Valbera archipelago. "I knew it," Phoebe said, as she looked at the boy in front of her, who had removed his steel helm. "She talks a lot about you. Rihanna often said that she might not have been able to make it back home if not for your help. She even told me that if I happen to come across you here in Solterra, I should tell you how thankful she is for your help. She, Christopher, Harry, and her hunting party members are now part of a group who communicated with each other frequently in Pangea." A faint smile appeared on 13's face after hearing that everyone seemed to be getting along. What he needed the most were connections. He didn't know what the background of the other wanderers were aside from Christopher and Harry. If their parents were business tycoons in Pangea, wouldn't that be amazing? Do you know what Rihanna's background is? 13 asked. You don't know? Phoebe asked with wide eyes. You really don't know? I didn't ask her anything about her private life, 13 shrugged. Everyone was just busy trying to survive, so knowing their family background was not important. I see. Phoebe nodded in understanding. She did say that you were someone who did things your way and only asked for help when it was needed. I think someone who doesn't like to meddle with the private life of others is a good person. 13 arched an eyebrow because he was far from being a good person. But being labeled as a good person was useful, so he didn't correct her. You still haven't answered my question, 13 replied. What kind of background does Rihanna have? Phoebe hesitated for a bit before giving her answer. Rihanna and everyone here came from military families, Phoebe replied. That is all that I can tell you because the rest is her private matter. 13 nodded and decided not to pry any longer. He could just investigate her once he returned to Pangea, which he believed to be happening very soon. What do you plan to do now? 13 inquired. Do you wish to stay here? No, Phoebe answered in a heartbeat. This place is no longer safe. Can we come with you? Rihanna told me that as long as I am with you, everything will be fine. Phoebe had short black hair and brown eyes, which could have made anyone mistake her for a boy with delicate features. 13 had a feeling that she had cut her hair before she was sent to Solterra, so that it wouldn't get in the way if she were to fight. In fact, the other girls and boys who were part of her team all had short hair, which he believed to be a tradition among the military families in Pangea. Just like how some soldiers would shave their heads when they joined the army. These children came here perfectly knowing that they would have to fight for their lives. Okay, you can come with me. 13 then looked in the direction where the other wanderers were last seen by Visego. But I still need to meet the leader of the other group of wanderers on this island. Are you talking about Herman's group? Phoebe asked. Why do you need to talk to them? I want to know if all of you have the mission called Enter the Gate of the Moonlight, 13 replied. Yes, that is exactly what our mission is. Phoebe nodded. Is that your mission as well, Zion? No, 13 replied. But I believe that it has a connection to it. The 10-year-old boy's quest was to prevent the Moon Princess from getting corrupted. Although it wasn't the same quest as entering the Gate of the Moonlight, he believed that the two quests were related to each other. A few minutes later, 13's and Phoebe's groups headed towards the base of the second group of wanderers on the island of Fecta. Since Phoebe knew who Herman was, the 10-year-old decided that it would be best if she were the one to introduce him to the scion of the Stallard family. But when they were only 100 meters away from the second base of the wanderers, they immediately noticed that something was wrong. The campsite where they usually gathered was in disarray, and blood stains could be seen on the ground. However, there were no corpses around that could tell them if the blood belonged to monsters or humans, which made Phoebe suddenly feel anxious. Let's enter the cave, Phoebe said. Herman told me that the cave where they were staying had an underground network. He offered to let me stay there if I wanted, but since we wanted to operate alone, we decided to reject his offer of forming a single unit. 13 looked at the cave in front of him and frowned. The entrance and the size of the cave was too small for Giga and the trolls to enter. You go ahead first, but don't go too deep in the cave. 13 smiled at Phoebe. I need to talk with my team for a bit. Understood. Phoebe motioned for her team to follow her. All of them had their weapons drawn, ready to fight if ever they encountered something dangerous inside the cave. When the wanderers were gone, Rocky emerged from the ground and opened its mouth wide. One by one, Giga, the ogres, and the trolls entered his mouth as if this was already part of their routine. Once his private army was inside the Magma Balboa's mobile fortress, Rocky once again burrowed to the ground. He would follow Zion, while traveling underground to ensure that he could assist him if a powerful monster were to appear inside the cave. One of the wanderers held a glowing artifact in his hand and stood at the very front to light the way. 13 had caught up with Phoebe's group, and together they went deeper inside the cave until they arrived at a cavern. As they walked inside the cave, they noticed stains of blood on the floor, and had continued up to this point inside the cave. There were also several footprints on the ground, and judging by their sizes, they could have belonged to goblins and their higher-ranked forms, hobgoblins. Times like this, he wished that he had Taiga with him. However, since he brought most of his troops to the third island, he had no choice but to leave the tigerkin behind so that he could protect his sister just in case something happened. He had also left Poca behind and only brought Visago with him to scout the third island. It was also because of this reason why he was able to come to Phoebe's rescue right away due to the commotion that the goblins had caused, which could be seen from the sky. But after seeing the things outside and inside the cave, he believed that the goblins might have raided this place a little earlier compared to Phoebe's group. Still, why is it so silent? 13 thought. Have the goblins left already? Tiona, who was coiled up on his neck, kept flicking her tongue from time to time, as if trying to locate any lingering scent in the surroundings. After walking for a long time, the cavern split into 4 intersections, forcing 13 and Phoebe to make a choice. Judging by the footprints and bloodstains on the ground, the most obvious choice was the farthest left corner. However, before the younger boy and the wanderers could walk in that direction, Tiona gave a soft hiss, stopping her master from his tracks. The right one? 13 asked. Tiona hissed a second time before nodding her head. Let's go to the right path, 13 declared. But the trail went this way, Phoebe commented. 13 shook his head. It doesn't matter. Tiona said to go this way, so I'll go this way. Of course, you can choose to go that way if you wish. But I'm going this way. Taking out a torchlight that used cores as a source of energy, 13 headed to the rightmost path with confident steps. Seeing that their savior was heading to a different pathway, Phoebe and her team followed not long after. After seeing how deadly the 10-year-old was in battle, they believed that it would be safer to stay close to him. Also, Phoebe had heard about the younger boy's legendary exploits from Rihanna. He was the one that orchestrated the defeat of a Magian prince, which not even the monarchs of Pangea dared to face together. But there was one thing that puzzled her, as well as all the other people that had heard the story of Zion Levinus. Rihanna said that the boy told her that he accidentally entered a dimensional gate and was sent to the Houdini Desert. Of course, these stories did in fact happen in the past. However, there was one important factor that many didn't miss. If he entered a dimensional gate, how did he manage to arrive in the Houdini Desert? Usually, dimensional gates were connected to the territories of the jinns and magians. If a 7-year-old accidentally entered that kind of dimensional gate, he would have long been jinn poop by now. But Zion was alive and even thriving in Solterra. News about him had also spread in Pangea, making the authorities investigate if similar incidents had happened in the past. As much as the Levintus family tried to rein in the news, it was simply impossible. There were many wanderers who had been part of Zion's team during the last stages of the war, and these same wanderers spread his feats after they returned to Pangea. Naturally, the people of the military had heard about this since Rihanna was very vocal about 13. So, when they finally met the living legend, they decided that they would hug his thigh no matter what, so that they could return to Pangea just like Rihanna and the others. After walking for some time, they once again came into an intersection. This time, there were no blood stains anywhere. There were also no traces that someone had come to this part of the underground cave network. Tiona once again hissed, telling her master where to go. This time, 13 went to the middle path and walked until he and Phoebe's team arrived at an underground river. They jumped into the river. The black snake nodded. The flow of the water wasn't strong, so there was no danger of being washed away by the current. Using his torch, 13 noticed that the underground river wasn't that deep, so he decided to walk on it to see how deep it was. The river was at least 6 meters wide, so it didn't take long for him to reach the center. At most, it was only a meter deep, which could easily be traversed by teenagers older than him. Let's follow the river, 13 said before motioning for Phoebe and the others to come to him. They only had 2 artifacts that could light their way, so they decided to form 2 lines with 13 at the front and one holding the second artifact at the back. After walking for what seemed to be half an hour, the teenagers were already feeling cold from the water. But they persevered because they had been trained by their families to endure harsher situations. Finally, Tiona raised her head, telling her master that she could sense living creatures ahead. As to whether they were humans, goblins, or other creatures, they decided to prepare themselves just in case they were going to engage in battle. 13 once again wore the black helm, which covered his face, while the other wanderers held their weapons firmly in their grasp. After walking for a few more minutes, they saw a light source in the distance, with several human children gathered around it. The moment they noticed the light that was coming from 13's torch, the second group of wanderers prepared for battle. They didn't know that the one holding the light was a human because he was wearing a black set of armor. "Wait," Phoebe shouted. "We're not NMHHHH." 13 hastily covered Phoebe's mouth because her shout echoed across the caverns. The second group of wanderers also lowered their weapons after hearing Phoebe's shout, but their faces became pale when they realized what just happened. Soon, the sound of roars echoed in the surroundings, making all the wanderers who heard them shudder due to how close these roars sounded to them. Phoebe, who realized what she just did, looked ashen because she might have just doomed all of them with that single shout from her. 13, who also understood that this wasn't the time to blame anybody, motioned for the other wanderers to go to the second group of wanderers. "Close the lights," 13 said. "Although these monsters might have night vision, they will spot us faster if they can see a light source." Herman, who was the owner of the glowing artifact, nodded and deactivated its effects. Soon, the entirety of the cavern returned to its dark state, with everyone hoping that it would be enough to make their pursuers unable to find their location, which was their last bastion of hope. The roars in the cave quieted down after some time. Only the faint sound of the river flowing several meters away from them could be heard in the surroundings. But a soft hissing sound that coincided with the sound of the river soon reached everyone's ears. This lasted for a few seconds before the deafening silence returned. But it was merely a brief calm before the storm, for a loud roar reverberated inside the underground tunnels after a minute passed. This roar felt and sounded very different from the goblins. It was as if an ancient monster had awakened from its sleep and had now emerged to attack those who had stepped inside its domain. Loud screams, shrieks, as well as bellows, filled the underground cavern. The wanderers, especially the girls, covered their lips with their trembling hands as they screamed silently from fright. The sounds were enough to tell them that someone was attacking the goblins, and whatever it was winning. This chaos lasted for nearly 15 minutes before the screams began to fade. Clearly, the goblins had decided to run away after coming face to face with something that they couldn't defeat. The ensuing silence made everyone's ears ring, deafening to the point that it started to hurt. No one dared to say anything, fearing that doing so might make whatever chased off the goblins come to find them next. But this unanimous decision to keep silent was broken by someone who thought that the coast was already clear. "All right, it seems that all of us are now safe." Half a minute later, a faint glow appeared in front of everyone, allowing them to see the boy who was covered entirely in black armor. 13 glanced at the petrified kids who seemed to have forgotten how to breathe after he broke the silence. Finding their reaction funny, he took off his helmet and blew on his torchlight as if blowing a candle, making the surroundings dark again. "What's wrong?" 13 asked, as everyone was once again shrouded by the darkness. "Are you afraid of the dark?" As if waiting for that moment, two giant fiery eyes appeared behind the 10-year-old, casting an eerie light in the surroundings. This time, the wanderers all screamed as the owner of those eyes suddenly made its entire body burst into flames. The magma Balboa, Rocky, wanted to tease the teenagers and give them a fright. He just didn't expect that his appearance would frighten them to the extent that some of them fainted and lost consciousness. 13 glanced behind his back and scratched his head as a reaction to Rocky's antics. Tiona, on the other hand, hissed and praised her subordinate for making a grand entrance. "Don't worry, everyone," 13 said. "This is Rocky, and he's a friend of mine. He won't hurt any of you." Phoebe and the others, who had recognized the magma Balboa, sighed in relief because they really thought that they were goners. When everyone finally calmed down, 13, Phoebe, and Herman started their meeting. Rocky left the scene to check the surroundings and make sure there were no other threats lurking inside the underground cave network. With such a powerful monster as their ally, the Wanderers finally had enough peace of mind to settle down and discuss the situation properly. First things first, let me introduce myself, 13 said. My name is Zion Leventis, and I... Before 13 could even finish his sentence, one of the girls squealed, forcing 13 to look behind him. For a moment, he thought that another monster aside from the mischievous Rocky had appeared behind him. But, seeing that no one was there, he looked back at the girl that screamed in confusion. "Are you really Zion Leventis?" the girl who screamed asked in excitement. The legendary rookie who orchestrated the defeat of a Magian prince. 13 blinked, once then twice before replying. "Yes, I am Zion Leventis," 13 replied. "Wow, he is really Zion Leventis. To think that he really existed. I thought that it was just propaganda by the Leventis family." "Wait, according to the reporters, isn't he the son of Gerald Leventis? The one who was kicked out of the Leventis family? Who cares who his father is? Have you ever seen anyone defeat a Magian prince? Even the monarchs don't dare fight them. Sir Zion, can I get your autograph? Can I shake hands with you? Hey, can I be your friend? I want to brag when I return to Pangea that I am a friend of Zion Leventis." 13 was overwhelmed by the reaction of the Wanderers because he had no idea that his name had already spread far and wide in Pangea. Little did he know that he was now the idol of a lot of Wanderers, especially those who had just become rookies. Of course, the Leventis family prevented anyone from interviewing Gerald and his family to ask for confirmation about their son's appearance in Solterra. However, even if outsiders didn't manage to get their side of the story, the Wanderers who had been with him started to spread his story far and wide. Since one of the teenagers who had accompanied him on his quest was a scion of the Remington clan, this news gained credibility. Harry also didn't shy away from sharing his experience in the Valbera archipelago to everyone. However, some thought that the news was just an exaggerated story. Even the monarchs didn't believe that a boy who had fought against Magian Prince would survive the encounter. Since no one had seen 13 after the battle in the Valbera archipelago, most people thought that he had died because he wasn't sent back to Pangea. However, Herman and the other Wanderers, who were seeing him now, all looked at him with awe and worship. 13 suddenly felt Tiona nudging his cheek. It was as if she wanted him to wipe away the smug look that appeared on his face. This was the first time that the system of cannon fodders had people praising him and looking at him as if he was a celebrity, so his body reacted naturally, making him look and feel smug. Phoebe and her team also idolized him. They had grown a bit numb to his extraordinary exploits after hearing Rihanna praise him over and over in their inner circle, so they were able to contain their feelings when he introduced himself to them the first time. Knowing that things wouldn't progress if he stayed silent, the teenage boy cleared his throat in order to divert the attention of the Wanderers to other matters. Okay, let's put that aside for now. 13, who was brought back to reality by Tiona, decided to deal with the current situation first. "Herman, what do you plan to do now? Do you wish to stay here and use the underground caves as your base of operations?" The teenage boy with short reddish-brown hair and blue eyes glanced at his team, wanting to see if they were willing to stay and use the caves as their base. However, after seeing the anxious look on their faces, he understood that his teammates had no intention of staying underground and hiding from their enemies. But instead of answering 13, he shifted his attention to Phoebe and asked her a question. "Were you also attacked by goblins?" Herman asked. "Yes," Phoebe replied. "It was Zion who came to our rescue. After that, he said that he wanted to talk to you, so we came here." Phoebe didn't need to tell the rest of the story since all of them were now together in one place. "Do you plan to go with him?" Herman inquired. Phoebe nodded. "You also saw it, right? With that monster as his friend, the chances of my team surviving this mission, if we stick to him, is very high. Besides, Rihanna kept telling me that if I happen to cross paths with him, I should always take his words seriously." After hearing the answers to his question, Herman finally shifted his attention to the boy who had become popular in Pangea. "If we listen to you, do you think we will have a higher chance of going back to our world? Herman asked. As an heir of one of the 10 prestigious families, he also prided himself in his ability to survive in Solterra. However, after what he experienced just now, he realized that the extensive training he got from his family wouldn't guarantee that he would be able to return to Pangea alive. Your life is your own, 13 replied. Whatever choices you make, you should not blame others for their outcome. I will not tell you that if you follow me, I can guarantee that you will be able to return to Pangea. The last time I made that kind of promise, I almost died after facing a Magian prince. Besides, there is someone that I need to protect here in the Arcadia archipelago. I will prioritize her life over all of you. Are you talking about Shasha? Herman arched an eyebrow. Is she also here? You know my sister? 13 couldn't help but arch an eyebrow because his sister sure was popular. How can I not know who she is? Herman asked. Did you forget? You're like a celebrity. So, naturally, your family members are also very popular in Pangea. You should see how many teenage boys are trying to get close to her. How about you? 13 asked with genuine curiosity. Are you one of those boys? I already have a fiancé. I see. For a brief moment, the 10-year-old thought that he would need to deal with another Cain Stallard, who had recently started calling him Brother Zion. There was also the fact that Taiga seemed to have developed a crush on his sister. With so many boys trying to get Shasha's attention, 13 felt that he should permanently station 01 and 02 as his sister's protectors from now on. So, what is the reason you came to look for me? Herman inquired. Are you trying to rally all the Wanderers to form one group? 13 shook his head. Originally, I only planned to ask you guys about what you intend on doing to tackle your missions. Depending on your answers, I will share with you some information that might help all of you enter the gate of the moonlight. The moment the Wanderers heard his statement, all of them paid more attention to his words. I don't mind joining your group, Herman stated, but I want to retain command over my people. However, if some of them wish to transfer to your sister's team, I will allow them to leave. 13 nodded. How about you, Phoebe? Do you plan to do the same? Yes, Phoebe replied in a heartbeat. Although I would like to join a bigger organization, I also wish to retain authority over my team. We are already used to fighting together, so we are better as an independent unit. Good, let's go with that, 13 agreed. I also don't plan to command many people, so I'll just treat all of you as independent teams. However, I expect that all of you will join the meetings that I will set up. That way, we will be able to work together to achieve a common goal. Phoebe and Herman both agreed to 13's statement. Truth be told, they also wanted to personally see if the stories about him were true or if they were just something that had gotten blown out of proportion. Okay, listen well. I will now share the information I gather with all of you, 13 said before telling them about the 2 rank 8 sovereigns and the 2 pyramids that they treated as their home. When Phoebe, Herman, and the Wanderers heard his story, all of them turned pale because of the gravity of the situation. None of them could even hope to defeat a rank 5 sovereign, let alone a rank 8, who could easily kill all of them 100 times over. The Arcadia archipelago is composed of 4 islands, 13 explained. The rank 8 unicorn is on the first island, while the rank 8 beholder is in Alcade. Just like all of you, there are also wanderers on the first and fourth island. Since you guys are the closest, I decided to visit all of you first before checking the other islands to see how the other wanderers are faring. After figuring out how all of us can work together, I will try investigating the pyramids to look for clues about the Gate of the Moonlight. All of you are free to do whatever you want until then. Phoebe and Herman glanced at each other, both feeling anxious about their current situation. If what Zion said were true, then they should prepare themselves for the worst possible outcome. However, after remembering that the boy in front of them had faced something stronger than a rank 8 sovereign, both of them felt a bit hopeful, especially after knowing that Shasha Leventis was also in the Arcadia archipelago. As long as she was there, Zion would definitely go above and beyond to make sure that his sister would return to Pangea, where their family was waiting for their safe return. After everyone decided that they would follow 13 back to the second island, they headed toward a cliff where a ship was docked. He had asked Rocky to go ahead of them so that he could unload the trolls and the ogres on the ship without arousing any suspicion from the wanderers. After everyone arrived at their destination, the 10-year-old asked them to do something, which made their faces turn pale. "You want us to jump?" Phoebe asked anxiously. "Are you sure we need to jump down to the ship?" "Yes," 13 replied. "Don't worry. Just do what I do." 13 didn't hesitate to jump down on the ship, which was right below the cliff. A second later, his descent slowed down until both of his feet landed safely on the ship's deck. "See," 13 said, "just trust me and do it. It's perfectly safe." Seeing that none of the wanderers was willing to go first, Herman gritted his teeth before jumping off the cliff. Similar to what happened to the younger boy earlier, his descent slowed down until he landed safely on the deck of the ship. Then it finally hit him. There were 3 trolls standing on the ship, holding staves, and they were looking up at the cliff as if waiting to see if there would be other teenagers that were going to jump off it. They were the alpha troll shamans, the rare kind of troll that could use spells. Seeing that Herman was safe and sound, Phoebe gathered her courage and jumped as well. When she, too, landed safely on the deck of the ship, the wanderers were finally assured that they had nothing to worry about. The wanderers jumped one by one, and each time they did, the fear on the hearts of the ones who were still on the cliff lessened. A few minutes later, all the wanderers were standing at the deck of the ship, feeling relieved that their little test of courage was finally over. "Set sail," 13 ordered, and the trolls and ogres stepped into action. They unfurled the sail, and the 3 troll shamans summoned a gust of wind to push the ship back to the second island, where Shasha was waiting for her brother's return. The second island was also the biggest island of the Arcadia archipelago. Fortunately, Shasha's base was near the beach, so it didn't take long for them to reach their destination. But the ship couldn't be moved to shallow waters, so they had to use the smaller boats that 13 took out from a storage ring. The Ring of the Apocalypse had a storage space of 200 square meters, so he could store a few things inside of it without worry. Since the wooden boats had a simple identical design, 13 had stacked them on top of each other, saving a lot of space. All in all, he had 6 of these small wooden boats, which could hold all of the members of his crew. Since they would be ferrying the wanderers, each ship was manned by 2 trolls, accompanied by 6 wanderers. Although he could fit 1 or 2 more wanderers to make it efficient, he decided that it would be safer for them if they just stuck to 6 wanderers per wooden boat. Herman and Phoebe volunteered to be left behind, allowing their people to go to the shore first. While waiting for the boats to return, the 2 of them talked to 13 and asked him a few questions about the hierarchy of the wanderers on the second island. "Similar to what you proposed, there are 2 leaders on the second island," 13 stated. "One of them is my sister, Shasha, and the other is Cain Stallard. Cain has more wanderers under his command, and he is acting as their leader even now." Since 13 planned to treat Cain, Phoebe, and Herman as team leaders of their respective teams, he decided to answer all of their questions to the best of his abilities. "So, what do you really plan to do after gathering all the wanderers from the first and fourth islands?" Herman inquired. "Will we all attack one of the rank 8 sovereigns in order to investigate the pyramid?" "I didn't think that you'd have suicidal tendencies," 13 replied in a teasing tone. "Do you really think that ordinary teenage boys and girls, numbering in the hundreds, would have a chance of defeating a rank 8 sovereign? In their eyes, we're just bugs that they can pinch to oblivion. But depending on the bug, they can be deadly as well," Phoebe countered. "Also, you have experience facing off against a Magian prince. Compared to that powerhouse, rank 8 monsters are easier to fight, right?" 13 shook his head firmly. "This and that are completely different. Although a rank 8 sovereign is weaker than a Magian prince, it doesn't change the fact that it is still a very strong monster." The younger boy didn't want to elaborate that he only managed to win because he had several weeks to prepare an ideal battlefield, as well as the perfect counter to Arundel, which would allow him to have a shot at victory. Their current circumstances were different. He didn't have the resources of thousands of beast cores in his disposal, which would have allowed him to create a rune formation that could trap the unicorn or the beholder. He was only able to lure Arundel to the center of the formation because he taunted him by using the Magian prince's greatest shame of pleading with his life. That was something that the Magian prince didn't want anyone to know about, even if it were his subordinates who hadn't been there when it happened. For the time being, Your mission is to absorb as many cores as possible, which will allow all of you to break through to the rookie rank, 13 explained. I will investigate the pyramids on my own because it will be easier that way. 13 had already thought of a few ways he could infiltrate the two pyramids with a high chance of success. For now, he just wanted all the wanderers to gather on the second island, so that when he finally understood how to make the Gate of the Moonlight appear, all the wanderers would have a chance to return to Pangea. He wasn't really doing this for any noble reason. He simply refused to turn a blind eye to those he could have helped if he was able to. 13 didn't want to have any regrets in this lifetime. Since it was also his last mission before returning to Pangea, he also wanted the teenagers who had been spirited away from their families and friends to have a second chance at life. "Welcome back, brother." Cain excitedly greeted the moment he saw 13 riding on top of Giga, followed by dozens of wanderers heading toward their camp. Herman, who heard Cain's bootlicking, smirked because he had already expected to see something like this happen. It wasn't a secret that one of the scions of the Stallard family was smitten with Shasha. He could understand why many were attracted to her. Not only was she beautiful, but she was very talented as well. There had been a small tournament held at one of the gatherings of the Monarch clans, and Shasha participated in them. To everyone's surprise, she defeated all her opponents, including the teenagers from the Monarch clans. The Stallard clan also recognized her strength, which was the reason why they weren't getting in the way of Cain's attempt to woo Shasha. In fact, if Herman didn't already have a fiancée, the patriarch of the Nightshade family might have asked him to also try and seduce the young lady, whom everyone recognized as one of the strongest rookies of the young generation. 13 ignored Cain and walked past him. The person he wanted to see was Shasha, but his sister was inside the cave and meditating. Cain, who had been ignored, scratched his head before glancing in the direction of the newcomers. He recognized a few faces, and he even smiled when he saw Herman from the crowd. "Herman, it's good to see you here," Cain said as he approached his acquaintance. "How have you been for the past few weeks?" "Just fine," Herman replied, after seeing that Cain was being friendly with him. Herman had above-average looks, but Cain didn't see him as a threat for Shasha's affection because the former already had a fiancée. "How did Brother Zion convince all of you to follow him?" Cain inquired. "Did something happen?" As someone who was raised by the Monarch clan, Cain believed that Herman wasn't the type to become someone else's subordinate. If he weren't head over heels with Zion's sister, Shasha, he would have refused to merge their group together. However, after knowing that they were up against two rank 8 sovereigns, Cain decided that it was wise to hug 13's thigh. He felt that he'd have a higher chance of surviving if he stuck to him. "Things happened," Herman replied, not planning to elaborate. "How about you? How did he convince you?" "He didn't convince me," Cain replied. "I just thought that cooperating with Shasha's team was a good decision." Herman scoffed. "Look at me when you answer, fool. It's very obvious that you're not telling me everything." Cain pretended not to hear what he had just said and approached some of his acquaintances who were part of Herman's group. Phoebe and her team came from military families, so they didn't have any interaction with the Monarch clans and the 10 prestigious families. All of them mostly stayed within the circle of the military families, which only strengthened their will to cooperate with each other. When the two groups finally settled in, Shasha's right-hand woman, Miriam, served food so that everyone could eat. While 13 went to the third island, all the wanderers on the second island started to hunt monsters in earnest. They made sure that their territory was safe from monsters who might attack them when they were least prepared. Poca and Visago had already scouted the island, and 13 made a makeshift map in accordance with their report. He told the leaders of the group to stay away from certain landmarks because they were the territory of lower-ranked overlords and sovereigns. The Wanderers might be able to defeat a rank 3 monster if they worked together, but fighting against overlords and sovereigns still required more manpower. Also, only those who had been trained to fight could handle such monsters. The rest could only play a support role from the back. Not all Wanderers were born from well-off families, so the majority of them didn't have any survival skills. Even so, they had no choice but to learn how to fight if they wished to survive their first mission in Solterra. "You're back, Zion," Shasha said as soon as she sensed her brother's presence. How did your trip go? She was currently meditating at the deepest part of the cave, and she knew that the only one who would dare to disturb her was her brother. Even Cain didn't dare to offend Shasha while she was meditating. Of course, there was another reason why no one could approach her. Taiga was blocking the path, while staying 100 meters away from her. Taiga naturally didn't dare to stop his master, so 13 walked past him easily. I brought all the wanderers from the third island here, 13 replied. They are led by Herman Nightshade and a girl named Phoebe. You can meet them later. Shasha nodded. I know who Herman is, but I don't know anyone named Phoebe. She's from the military. I see. Shasha hadn't interacted with any teenager from the military family since her grandfather, Arthur, only brought her to the parties of the monarch clans and the 10 prestigious families. Are you going to visit the first island next? Shasha inquired. Yes, 13 answered. Compared to the beholder, I'm hoping that the unicorn will be more sociable. Are you planning to talk to it? Shasha arched an eyebrow. No. 13 shook his head. There's a higher chance that it would want to talk if you were there. Unable to understand what her brother meant, Shasha tilted her head in confusion. 13 only smiled, not planning to tell her one of the quirks of the unicorns. They only interacted with maidens, especially chaste maidens. If 13 were to talk to the unicorn, there was a high chance that it would either stomp him, kick him, or stab him with its horn to oblivion. Also, 13 didn't believe that the unicorn was unaware of the presence of humans in its territory. Because of this, he planned to first approach the wanderers living on the first island cautiously. They might have already entered into an agreement with the rank 8 sovereign. If that were the case, and he did something reckless, there was a chance that both the wanderers and the rank 8 monster would team up against him. Zion, my dear friend, where are you right now? Kamisats rested his hand on the 10-year-old's shoulder and gave the latter the most devilish smile he could muster. Please tell me your location. I promise I won't send my friends to hunt you down. I am currently in Mammon's city, 13 replied casually. Feel free to visit me anytime. This Kamisats would always ask the young human boy about his location whenever he saw the latter in the conference room of the apocalypse. He was hoping that 13 would slip up so that his whereabouts would finally be known to him. In the past 3 years, the members of the Order of the Apocalypse had shown the boy's face to their subordinates, as well as their acquaintances. They even discreetly placed a bounty on his head, but it was not to kill him. The bounty was only asking for any relevant information related to him, especially where he was currently at. For the past 3 years, 13 had been playing hide-and-seek with the members of the Order. But to this day, none of them were able to get a scent of his trail. The only one who wasn't making any moves to look for him was none other than Camersipa. Kamisats and the others had tried to hire her services in order to look for 13's location. Unfortunately, whenever they tried, Camersipa would turn them down. At first, they thought that the reward they offered to give her wasn't enough. They only gave up after Camersipa told everyone that she was unable to use her divination to locate any member of the Order due to a mysterious power protecting them all. Also, Camersipa found Zion quite interesting. The young boy had defeated Arundel despite being at a disadvantage, so she knew that the boy couldn't be someone ordinary. He might be weak, but there was something about him that made her believe that the boy was someone they needed if they wished to break the status quo between the Celestials and the fiends who ruled over Solterra. All right, please don't disturb me for now, Mr. Deathbat, 13 said as he pried Kamisat's hand from his shoulder. I need to talk with Metatron. I still haven't gotten my reward from the treasury. Kamisats loudly sighed because he found Zion's missions very unfair. All the boy needed to do was kill rank 4 sovereigns, and he would gain apocalypse points, which would allow him to unlock the other layers of the treasury and get some very rare items from its keeper, Metatron. 13 had only been in the Order for 3 years, yet he had already unlocked the second layer and was already halfway to being able to unlock the third layer. Kamisats had joined the Order earlier than Zion, but he had yet to unlock the second layer. Because of this, he was very bitter about the boy who could just kill rank 4 sovereigns without too much effort. To make matters worse, if he killed a rank 5 sovereign, he would gain 5 points. If he killed a rank 6 sovereign, he would get 30 points. A rank 7 would net him 100 points, and a rank 8 would net him 600 points. A rank 9 was 4,000 points, and last but not the least, a Magian Prince would give him 10,000 points. 13 often commented that if possible, he would like to kill Kamisats since he looked easier to kill than Arundel, making the death bat snort. It was no exaggeration to say that 13 held a very special position within the order. Some of the members were even considering helping him achieve his goal. After all, once he unlocked the final layer of the treasury, he would be able to receive Pandora's box. This was the one thing that all of them were aiming for, and realistically speaking, the one closest to obtaining it was none other than the weakest member of their organization. After entering the treasury, Metatron appeared in front of him with a smile on his face. "Welcome back, 13, Metatron said. "How are you faring in your new adventure? Did you perhaps come here because you have hit a wall that you cannot overcome using normal means?" "Yes," 13 replied in a heartbeat. "Actually, I am here to ask you for some recommendations, Metatron." In the past 3 years, 13 had acquired 2 more items from the treasury. One of them was a sea conch, which he received after joining the order. The second one was a portable teleporter, which allowed him to set 3 waypoints that would let him travel to those places almost instantly. But there was a catch. He could only set waypoints to the places where he had been. Aside from that, the teleportation was a one-way thing. For example, if he teleported from the Arcadia archipelago to the Valbera archipelago, he wouldn't be able to return to the former if he didn't set a waypoint there. The waypoint could also only carry a maximum of 6 individuals each time. If he were to teleport with Tiona, she would be counted as a second individual. But this was not an issue at all, for he had a way to make things more convenient. He could simply let everyone enter Rocky's mobile fortress and teleport the Magma Balboa with him to the place where he wanted to go, then unload everyone at their destination. Every member of the Order who had managed to unlock the second layer of the gate had this portable teleporter as well. It was Metatron's highly recommended item, and it served the Magian princes and princesses well. "So what do you need?" Metatron inquired. "Remember, I cannot give you special treatment. You can only receive 1 item this year from the treasury. You will have to wait until after the winter solstice to get another item from the treasury." "I know." 13 nodded. "I have 2 questions. The first one is, will it be possible to exchange items in the treasury for something just as important? For example, information?" "Information?" Metatron pondered for a bit. "Well, information is indeed a valuable thing. Depending on what it is, I might consider trading it for something of equivalent exchange. Then, what if I exchanged a treasure here instead of information?" 13 inquired. "Since the treasury can house extremely rare items of the mythical, legendary, and divine rank, is it possible to trade something of equivalent value?" "Information?" 13 inquired. "Since the treasury can house extremely rare items of the mythical, legendary, and divine," Metatron didn't answer right away. Instead, he pondered for a bit. A few minutes later, he reluctantly nodded his head, making 13 sigh in relief. Since there was room for negotiation, he would be able to exchange items within the treasury, without the need to wait for the winter solstice to come. "As long as it is indeed worth exchanging, I will consider it," Metatron stated. "In fact, if it is truly unique, I am willing to exchange more than 1 item from the treasury. But remember this, it must only be of equivalent value." 13 nodded. "Then, there is something I want to ask you." "Ask away." I am currently in this kind of situation." 13 told Metatron about the 2 boss monsters whom he might need to fight in order to clear his current quest. After 13 told the other party about what he needed, Metatron only chuckled before summoning an item from the second layer of the treasury. "I believe this is the item that you're looking for," Metatron said. "Remember, this is a consumable. After using it once, it will disappear. So, are you going to use your last opportunity in the treasury to exchange for this item?" "Tell me more about what it could do first," 13 commented. Metatron was more than happy to tell him what the item was capable of doing. After 13 asked the Guardian a few more things, he decided that it was truly the item that he needed to complete his current mission. "Thanks, I just hope that I will not need to use this anytime soon," 13 said. "Well, in any case, I already told you what you need to know, Metatron smirked. Good luck, and do your best not to die, Zion. I was sincere when I said that I have taken a liking to you. So, as long as you don't plan on breaking any rules of the Order, I will help you in any way that I can. 13 nodded and returned to the second island of the Arcadia archipelago. After racking his mind, he really couldn't think of any way to deal with the unicorn and the beholder that he might need to fight in the future. For this reason, he resorted to using his last chance to get an item from the treasury of the apocalypse. I'm going to the first island first, 13 thought. Visego's report will probably give me the information I need without the need for a direct confrontation. 13 had already bid his farewell to Shasha and the others. He also left the bulk of his forces to protect her and the other wanderers. The only creatures who would be accompanying him to the first island were Tiona and Blackie. Since he had evolved into a rank 5 sovereign called a Nightmare Blackhound, Blackie had become stronger and faster than ever before. Also, Blackie was a good swimmer, which was the main reason why he planned to only take Blackie with him on his expedition. Using a boat might alert the unicorn, so he planned to travel as stealthily as he could, lowering the risk of accidentally provoking the rank 8 sovereign, whom he had to face sooner or later. It was noon when 13 arrived at his destination. Just as he expected, it didn't take long for Blackie to swim from the second island to the first island. Visego, who had also accompanied him on his trip, flew ahead of him to observe the wanderers, as well as the unicorn from the sky. He knew that his master would want a detailed report of the current situation, so he did his job properly. By the time Blackie touched down on the shore, Visego was already there to greet them while perched on a coconut tree. Master, the unicorn is currently inside the pyramid with his pets, Visego said. Good, 13 replied. Let's visit the first team of wanderers first. Visego nodded and once again took off in the air. 13, on the other hand, told Blackie to rest for a while and follow his scent once he had properly rested. Since Visego was with him, he didn't have to worry about running into strong monsters in the surroundings. They had landed near the territory of the wanderers, so it didn't take a long time for 13 to find their camp. Visego was right. All of them are boys. 13 mused. The unicorn took all the girls. From his perspective, this was a unicorn being merciful to the wanderers. Since it tolerated the boys in its territory, that meant that he would allow them to do whatever they wanted on the first island. But, of course, the unicorn not hurting the boys was still unconfirmed. There might have been a one-sided agreement from both sides since the wanderers didn't dare to offend such a powerful monster. If the unicorn doesn't plan to hurt the wanderers, then I don't need to bring them to the second island, 13 thought. Having wanderers here to keep watch on what is happening in the island is also a good thing. With these thoughts in his head, 13 made his way to the first camp. The first one to make contact wasn't him, but the wanderers who were out on a hunting mission. When they saw a boy that they hadn't seen before, all of them ran in his direction and asked him if he was a wanderer. Yes, I am a wanderer, 13 replied. I just arrived here on this island. Then, why do you have the black snake on your neck? One of the teenage boys asked. Isn't it poisonous? It is very poisonous, 13 replied. I saved it from being eaten by a hawk, so it has taken a liking to me. Tiona, who was coiled up on her master's neck, nodded her head, as if telling everyone that her master was telling the truth. Of course, this was a lie, but sometimes lying was just as important as telling the truth. Well, it's a good thing that you stumbled to our camp first, the teenage boy commented. If you went to the wrong place, you'd be dead by now. The 3 other teenagers nodded their heads in agreement to their leader's words. For the time being, why don't you accompany us first? The teenage boy proposed. My name is Rayon, by the way. Rayon was taller than most boys his age, and he also had a lean and toned body. Clearly, he was someone who had trained on how to fight before he was spirited away to Solterra. Okay, I'll come with you because all of you look strong, 13 replied. Rayon rubbed his nose, and the smile on his face widened. The 3 other teenagers who were part of his hunting team also had a good first impression of the boy. This guy here with the glasses is Tom, Rayon said as he pointed at his friend. The skinny boy is Finn, and this is the smartest person in our group. He goes by the name Joe. After introducing his teammates, 13 introduced himself as Zion. He didn't add his surname because he didn't want to deal with the aftermath of having the same name as one of the 10 prestigious families. Before following Rayon's team, 13 whistled and told Visego to pass his message to Blackie. For the time being, the Nightmare Blackhound would hide its presence, while doing its best to stay as close to his master as possible. After successfully hunting a rank 1 boar, Rayon and his team made sure to bleed out the monster before carrying it back to their base. 13 didn't do anything and simply watched them hunt the monster as a team, which was, to his surprise, a very impressive feat. Clearly, the 4 teenagers truly understood how to work as a team, so it didn't take them a long time to bring down the rank 1 with their bronze-ranked weapons. Half an hour later, they finally arrived at their destination. All in all, the Wanderers on the first camp consisted of only 18 individuals, including Rayon's team. Along the way, Rayon told him that there had been more of them in the past, but many had died due to the monsters inhabiting the first island. After skinning the boar, the teenagers worked together to roast it over their campfire. There was a spirit of unity, and it confirmed 13's guess that Rayon was the leader of this group of wanderers. After all of them ate together, the other wanderers introduced themselves one by one, allowing 13 to know all of their names. Just like earlier, he introduced himself as Zion, without mentioning his surname. Then, after thinking that the time was right, he asked an innocent question which made everyone's face turn solemn. "Are there only boys here?" 13 asked. A profound silence descended on the camp, and only the crackling of the campfire could be heard. Finally, a few minutes later, Rayon broke the silence and answered 13's question. "Do you remember what I told you earlier?" Rayon asked. "The thing about I'm lucky because I found you guys first?" 13 answered. "Yes," Rayon nodded. "If you wander to the southern part of this island, you might be dead by now." 13, who showed a look of confusion in his face, made Rayon and the other boys sigh in their hearts. "Listen, the southern part of the island is off limits," Rayon stated. "There is a monster there that can easily crush you like an insect." "What kind of monster?" "A unicorn." Rayon's face darkened as if he clenched his fists tightly. "A monster that goes by the name Vega," Rayon said in a cold tone. "It came to us one day and threatened to kill all of us if we didn't agree to its condition." The other teenage boys, who were listening, couldn't help but look down on the ground, feeling helpless as they remembered that fateful day. "It said that it would allow us to live and stay here in the island if all the girls were to serve and live with it," Rayon stated. "My sister and the rest of the girls agreed to his condition so that we would be spared from death. Fortunately, it allows my sister to visit us once a week to inform us that all of them are safe and sound. According to her, all of them were being treated well, and they didn't have to worry about food or any other necessities ever again." 13 found his words to be exactly what he had thought that the unicorn would do. The girls serving it wasn't necessarily a bad thing, because they would be protected by it. Also, they wouldn't need to worry about having to hunt for food, because the unicorn would do it for them. "My mission is to enter the gate of the moonlight," 13 said after Rayon had finally regained his calm. "Do all of you have the same mission?" "Yes," Rayon nodded. "That is the mission we have." "Then, do you have any idea on where this gate of the moonlight is?" 13 inquired. Rayon frowned and reluctantly gave an answer. "I'm not entirely sure, but I think the place where the unicorn lives has a clue about the gate," Rayon answered. "In fact, this is what my sister told me, so she's doing her best to investigate the interior of the cave. The unicorn doesn't mind the girls exploring its home. According to my sister, there are several writings etched within the inner chambers of the pyramid. Unfortunately, she didn't know what kind of language that is and how to decipher it." 13 smiled internally after hearing Rayon's words. He had already guessed that the clue to find the gate of the moonlight was indeed inside the pyramid. Now that his suspicion was confirmed, he would need to think of a way to infiltrate the pyramid without alerting the unicorn and make sure that he would be able to see those writings for himself. As someone who could understand any form of language in the world, he believed that he would be able to read it properly. After thinking for a while, he could only think of one method on how to get what he needed without endangering anyone's life. 13 looked at the black snake, who was nudging his cheek with her head. Tiona hissed, as if understanding what her master was thinking. 13 nodded to confirm Tiona's question, which made the black snake very happy. Right now, the only one who could safely enter the pyramid was none other than Tiona. Even if she was discovered by the unicorn, Vega, it would not dare to kill her, because killing her would get it killed as well. A rank 8 sovereign had reached its rank because it was smart and strong enough to understand the opponents that it could and couldn't fight. Although Tiona was just a rank 1 monster, the celestial who treated her kind as his sacred beasts would not allow anyone to kill her with impunity. 13 sat on a boulder not far from Rayon's camp. He made an excuse that he needed to meditate in order to calm his mind, allowing him to think in a more positive manner. Of course, this was far from the truth. He was currently looking through Tiona's eyes, allowing him to see whatever she was seeing. This was a skill that he gained after completing his 7th trial, and it was vision sharing. His beast companions could share their vision with him, which was a very good scouting method, allowing 13 to stay at a safe location, while the others went to investigate dangerous places. Right now, Tiona was burrowing deep underground and headed towards the pyramid. Since she had the skill Unblocked Passage, which allowed her to move effortlessly underground and pass through walls, she was the perfect scout to infiltrate the pyramid. It took Tiona 2 hours to reach the pyramid. While digging underground, she was using her detection abilities to pinpoint the location of the unicorn. She didn't want the monster to discover her, so she was making sure that it was at the very edge of her detection range. 13, who was feeling a bit nervous about this operation, forcefully calmed himself as Tiona went directly under the pyramid. "Don't do anything reckless, Tiona," 13 said, using his other skill, which he acquired after finishing his 9th trial, which was Beast Companion Telepathy. "Your safety is your utmost priority." Tiona hissed telepathically, telling her master that she understood. The boy didn't always use this skill because it took a large toll on his mind, especially since he was still an ordinary human boy and not yet a rookie. Also, he was communicating with Tiona over a great distance, so he couldn't always talk to her, or he would suffer a severe headache afterward. The two of them had already discussed the thing that Tiona needed to do after infiltrating the pyramid. This would save 13 the effort of telling her what to do when she got there. After making sure that the unicorn was outside the pyramid, Tiona poked her head inside the pyramid and looked around. The pyramid was dark, but this was not a problem for Tiona, who had dark vision. She carefully looked around her surroundings, and seeing that there was no one around, she started to crawl up the walls to head deeper inside the structure. Right now, she and 13 were looking for any clues that might help them with the mission that he needed to finish. The pyramid was large, extremely so, and there were many places that couldn't easily be reached using normal means. Fortunately, Tiona's skill, Unblocked Passage, allowed her to pass through walls like a ghost, so no obstacles could bar her way. Finally, after half an hour of searching, Tiona entered a room where a purple tablet was erected. On its surface was an ancient writing, which had long gone extinct in Solterra. Tiona gazed at this monolith from top to bottom, making sure that she saw every symbol that was written on it. 13, who could read and talk any language in the world, would have no trouble translating the monolith at a later time. So after making sure that she saw everything she had to see, she left the scene to go to the next room. A few seconds after she left, a presence appeared in the room of the monolith. A handsome man, who seemed to be in his early 30s, looked around with a frown on his face. He had long silver hair and blue eyes. The most noticeable feature was the silver horn on his forehead, which glowed faintly in the darkness. "Am I just imagining things?" the silver-haired man muttered as he inspected the room. But no matter how much he looked, he didn't see anything out of place. Half a minute later, he disappeared, and the room returned to its silent and dark state. Tiona was always in her stealth mode, so it was very hard for others to detect her. Of course, she got scared when she suddenly felt that the presence of a unicorn had disappeared from outside of the pyramid and reappeared in the room that she had just left a few seconds ago. For the entire duration that the silver-haired man was inside the room, Tiona didn't dare to move in fear that any movement might alert the magical creature that she didn't want to encounter no matter what to her presence. She was just in the next room, so it was highly possible for the unicorn to detect her movements if she made any attempt to escape. Fortunately, the unicorn left after several minutes, allowing Tiona to regain her calm. This time, she scouted the pyramid more carefully and saw more writings on the walls in the other rooms that she visited. The strategy that her master had given her was simple. She just needed to look at the symbols once, then leave, saving time and effort in her scouting mission. After nearly 3 grueling hours, Tiona had finally seen everything inside the pyramid. Within those 3 hours, the unicorn appeared 4 times in the rooms where she had previously visited, making it a very close call. The first 2 times, the unicorn thought that he was just being paranoid. But on the 3rd and 4th time, he was now certain that someone or something had indeed passed by the rooms where he appeared. Unfortunately for him, Tiona had already devised a strategy after the second encounter. She would just poke her head through the wall and look at the symbols before going back again. This was how she managed to evade the unicorn's 3rd and 4th attempt to capture whatever it was that had infiltrated its domain. Only when Tiona was 2 miles away from the pyramid did 13 finally breathe a sigh of relief. "Good work, Tiona," 13 said. "Make sure to stay underground until you reach me. Let's not take any chances." Tiona hissed, confirming that she would do as her master said. Since it would take a while for his beast companion to return, 13 focused on the images that Tiona had seen inside the pyramid. Since he had an eidetic memory, it was very easy for him to recall the images that Tiona had seen with great clarity. 13 began translating the symbols inside his head, hoping that it would be enough to answer some of his questions. He was not aware that while this was happening, the unicorn was still waiting for the intruder to show up in one of the rooms because he had finally devised a method to capture them. Fortunately, Tiona was already on her way back to her master, leaving the pyramid and its confused protector behind. A few hours later, Tiona, who had arrived beside 13, was happily eating a beast core that he had prepared for her. The 10-year-old was leaning on Black's body, as if he was sleeping. 13 was indeed sleeping because he was mentally exhausted from keeping his connection with Tiona. But it was worth it. While he didn't get any information about the Gate of the Moonlight, there was a passage referring to a ceremony that would need to be conducted during a lunar eclipse. A ceremony that would cover the Arcadia archipelago in darkness and allow the second coming of the Moon Princess.